anti-Trump super PAC being formed by the AFL-CIO and three large unions. According to the New York Times, the American Federation of Teachers, National Education Association, and AFSCME are contributing to the super PAC. The building trades unions don't want labor working with environmentalists and billionaire Tom Steyer to form the For Our Future PAC. The letter to the AFL-CIO, signed by presidents of 7 building trades union organizations, declares that we are not climate science deniers and have merely sought to ensure that the employment prospects of our members are not negatively impacted in any economic and energy transition. They object to an AFL-CIO alliance with Steyer and environmentalists creating the anti-Trump super PAC because the building trades say they are economically harming building trades members. The building trades unions are threatening to boycott the efforts of the super PAC to get out the anti-Trump vote in battleground states. LIUNA President Terry O'Sullivan wrote, "We object to the political agenda of the AFL-CIO being sold to a job-killing hedge fund manager with a bag of cash." North America's building trades and the American Federation of Teachers declined to comment on the letters, and we've gotten no response yet on reaction from the AFL-CIO, AFSCME, or NEA. An NLRB unfair labor practices complaint against the WeWork company was filed Tuesday by OPEIU Local 153 attorney Seth Goldstein. Goldstein says WeWork is violating labor law by requiring workers to sign arbitration agreements that strip them of their rights to take labor complaints to the courts. WeWork employee Tara Zoomer challenged the arbitration agreement in a lawsuit alleging unpaid overtime, wrongful termination, and retaliation. Goldstein says WeWork must be held accountable for breaking labor law.
Apparently, Adam Newman, founder of WeWork, pretends that his company is a hip-carrying millennial employer, but in reality, it's the same old thing. He's curtailing the rights of his employees to speak out under Section 7 of the National Labor Relations Act. And he's also trying to take their due process rights away by forcing them into arbitration agreements.
According to federal court testimony from a former Wisconsin State Senate staffer, Republicans were giddy about their voter ID law suppressing the vote in Democratic strongholds and in college towns in Wisconsin. Todd Albaugh testified that State Senator Mary Lozick argued in support of the voter ID law by urging fellow Republicans to consider its impact in Democratic strongholds of Milwaukee and at Wisconsin college campuses. Wisconsin Congressman Glenn Grothman, a former state senator, said he supported voter ID because it would help Republicans win elections. The testimony came in a federal lawsuit challenging aspects of the voter ID law in Wisconsin. WIN is made possible in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Yesterday's, well, the results, not overwhelmingly conclusive. Kentucky, very, very close. Oregon, all the way on the side of feeling the burn. We're going to get to talking about that. Some news from Harrisburg. Labor news from across the country. Also some tax dodging. Boy, lots to get to. But good news here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. For those who thought our General Assembly could do absolutely nothing. And for a while, I threw myself into that. It looks like there is one issue that our General Assembly has found common ground on, and that would be Senate Bill 290. This would require people convicted of drunk driving with a BAC above 0.1 to have an ignition interlock for 1 year post-conviction. Passed the House 193-2 and the Senate 50-0. I'm still trying to find out who the two were. And I'm sure that there's a very good reason. Missed the button, I don't know. But this, I guess, is a good thing. It's expected to be signed by Governor Wolf here in the coming days. I got to be honest, kind of shocked at the numbers when the mad people threw them out, because back in February, they released a report showing that these ignition interlocks, they stop people from driving drunk. And there's a point at which you go, the next step is everyone has them. I can see that coming. But, the numbers that they threw out by people who have been convicted having these ignition interlocks, they've stopped 1.77 million attempts by people who were intoxicated to start the car here in Pennsylvania. They say that the ignition interlocks, which is only for people who have convicted, I think it's 3 times for repeat offenders, 78,210 times, I guess, last year. So I guess a good thing. A number of states are going to it. 25 already have this on the books. Maryland will become the 26th state because I guess they're waiting for the signature. I'm not sure. In Vermont, they're going to be the 27th when their governor signs it. So it looks like Pennsylvania could be the 28th, and it is going on across the country. Several other states have similar legislation pending: Massachusetts, Rhode Island, North Carolina, Ohio, Michigan, California. So it's picking up steam, and like I said, the next step in this is it's going to be standard equipment on all cars. So look for that. Just thought I would give our General Assembly a little bit of credit for doing something. Just you got to give credit where credit is due. They did something today. Maybe they can justify their per diems today. Anyway, the big Democratic primary in Kentucky, very, very close. Hillary Clinton, 212,550 votes. Bernie Sanders, 210,626 votes. You're looking at about 1,900 votes, a little less, high 1,800s, in a race with over 400,000 people. And low turnout. Again, this is one of those moments where you go, people, you got to go cast your ballots. This stuff matters. And if enough people would have gotten off their duff, and look, we're going to find out if this is what holds their, according to Debbie Wasserman Schultz, there's no reason that this lead shouldn't hold, even though I'm sure there's going to be some challenges. And in an election this close, I would fully expect it to be. So interesting. Now, the conversation has turned. Everyone was expecting the Republicans to be crazy. And look, I'm planning on going to Cleveland for that. And I was hoping for insanity. Looks like maybe not, because Mitt Romney has kind of stepped back and said, no, we're not going to mount a third-party challenge. It looks like that might be the Trump coronation, where everyone gets in the line behind him. Because for the Republicans, if they lose the Senate, bad news. But the chances of, if you can get behind Trump, move him in your direction, wow, it could be steamroller time. And this is something the Democrats had better worry about. And as I've been talking to people today, I get this sense, and I've said this before, this is a blowback year in my estimation. Too much change too fast. Look, there are a lot of things. The bathroom thing I'm shocked by it. Honestly, I mean, I'm shocked that people have taken such firm ground stances. And I think it's, the immediacy of the change. I think this is one of those times where people have said enough is enough, and now the guy who's saying the outrageous stuff is where they're going to go. And my fear is the Donald wins Pennsylvania. And I was looking at an NPR story that said, can Trump turn Pennsylvania's disaffected Democrats into believers by November? And there was one line in there from the the guy who's one of the top Democrats in the state, who is saying, don't know if he's going to be able to do it. The reality is there aren't enough angry white people in Pennsylvania. And I'm going, I don't know about that. There are a lot of angry white people. A guy named Christopher Nicholas, a longtime Republican strategist, said at the end of the day, I don't think there are enough angry old white people in Pennsylvania to make up for the fact of what Trump is doing on the other side to motivate the base. Now, everyone's pointing to the big number, that I guess the 60,000 or whatever the number was, that they're saying that Democrats who flipped over to vote for Trump. Now, I would say some of those did it for a lark. Let's get Trump in. I don't know how they vote in November, but that should be kind of scary. Because and again, you come back to those voter suppression things. When you start setting up and you look at the pieces that the Republicans were really trying to put into place here with Mike Turzai and voter ID done, kind of makes you start looking at these elections as more possible. Because if you could do as Tom Corbett said in 2010, hold the vote down in Philadelphia, then you could really take off. Understand, Trump is going to take the middle of this state like I think no Republican has ever done. And that isn't a huge leap. That isn't a big, giant leap. I think he like the guy they quoted in their article, this Mike Zuby guy who evidently wore a Pennsylvania for Trump T-shirt to a baseball game. He said, what a breath of fresh air. To be able to wake up and at least know that there's someone out there, the average and ordinary type guy. He's not just a billionaire. He's speaking with total unpolitical correctness. He's speaking exactly what we want to be saying to this big monster called Washington. And that sentiment right there, for all of the angry all of the Tea Party people, that's their battle cry right there. And that's the scary stuff to me. The scary part of this is, and understand, the fact that someone views Trump as an ordinary, average guy, there's part of me that says he should be not allowed to vote. In fact, maybe maybe somebody is denying him air already. I don't know. But I look at this and I got to tell you, it is scary times ahead. And what the media is doing and what the Democratic Party is doing to itself also. I'm planning on going to Philadelphia. Could this be that blow up? Could this be the implosion of the Democratic Party? I mean, everyone was talking about the potential implosion of the Republican Party. Are we seeing finally progressives going, enough already? We want somebody who's actually going to do what we want done, and the base finally rising up. It's going to be interesting to see. Now, I was reading an article from, actually a Facebook post article from this digital activist guy named Tom Matzi. For those who know, he was the director of MoveOn.org from 2004 to 2007. He's someone who, in progressive circles is, kind of up there. One of those folks that they look up to. And he looked at, he's in his Facebook post said, I'm increasingly frustrated by both of them. The Sanders camp, he says, for not being honest with supporters about the mathematical impossibility of him winning. And the Clinton side of the Clinton camp's insistence that Sanders supporters are only sexist bros who descend into violent offensives. Pretty much my feeling. I mean, I look at what happened in Nevada, and honestly, I would be outraged. And it doesn't matter which side of the equation you were on. What that chairwoman did, wrong. Clearly, and I guess we're using applausometers to gauge who had the yays and the nays. When someone calls for a vote, you take a vote. You don't just go, you know what, I've decided that the yays were louder and we're going to adjourn and run out of here. That's not right on any platform. That is not what democracy looks like. And when I saw the report and I saw the clip and I put it out, I go, I'm going to regret this. This is a huge mistake. But again, this is what happens when you start from the end and work your way back. When you start from where we're coronating, it's Hillary's turn, and work your way back. So scary, scary times ahead. But, I guess why we play the game. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. Get your thoughts, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. Interested in what your thoughts of last night's endeavor are. When we come back, we're going to talk with Abe Amoros, legislative director for LiUNA here in Pennsylvania, about his thoughts on the day that was yesterday and where the Democrats are going, and maybe something that his former boss had to say. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1972. That was the day that Maggie Kuhn stood before a group of reporters to tell them about her organization, the Gray Panthers. The idea for the group had started 2 years earlier. 65-year-old Maggie had received the unwelcome news that she was going to be forced to retire from her executive position with the United Presbyterian Church. Maggie was not ready to retire. Instead, she started to organize. This was during the era of the Vietnam War protests, and Maggie found allies with young people who also wanted to see changes in society. The original group developed to build connections between young and old. They called themselves the Consultation of Older and Younger Adults for Social Change. Later, they shifted their name to the catchier Gray Panthers. The Panthers adopted the motto, Age and Youth in Action. In 1975, the Panthers held their first national convention in Chicago. 200 Panthers attended, representing 37 states. At the convention, the Panthers adopted a platform of issues. They included issues important to seniors, such as an end to mandatory retirement, better housing for the elderly, and expansions to rent control. But the platform also included other social justice issues, including support for the Equal Rights Amendment, a call for full employment, amnesty for Vietnam draft resistors, and even, after much debate, the legalization of marijuana. In the more than 40 years since their founding, the Gray Panthers have continued to advocate for a variety of issues. One key achievement was a court victory to make Medicare regulations more understandable to seniors, and they were years ahead of the nation by supporting single-payer health care for all. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Pam Vogel. Following the New York Times article about presumptive Republican nominee Donald Trump's treatment with women, some media figures downplayed the story. The piece, which conducted more than 50 interviews of women that had worked with Trump or knew him socially, revealed, quote, unwelcome advances, a shrewd reliance on ambition, and unsettling workplace conduct. Listen to Fox & Friends weekend co-host Tucker Carlson.
Is Trump creepier on women? Yeah. Sometimes he says kind of weird things I wouldn't say. But we also learned that Trump promotes women more aggressively than, like, Hillary Clinton.
And Washington Times columnist Kelly Riddell.
Bombshell, a man who used to own pageants, wanted his contestants to be pretty and skinny. Is this really news?
And Morning Joe co-host Mike Barnicle.
It's boorish behavior. You wouldn't want it occurring to your daughter by a guy, but it's Donald Trump. And when it comes to Donald Trump, it comes with the dinner. People expect it.
Dismissing Trump's treatment of women exemplifies how the media holds Trump to a lower standard than other politicians. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous. The salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, You'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happy!
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Life in the fast lane, sure makes you use your mind. Life in the fast lane.
Ah, yes, life in the fast lane, or the Fast Eddie lane, if you will. Our former governor, Ed Rendell, in the news again. And look, he's a Hillary surrogate. He's in the Hillary camp, and he's been there since 2008, so no surprise that he was asked about the Donald. And if, the Donald had any real chance of getting working class Democrats into his camp. And he said, Trump would have some appeal among the working class Democrats in his state. He said that he'd lose out among Republican women. And the quote that's now gotten him in a little hot water to Washington Post is Ed Rendell said, quote, for every one, he'll lose 1.5 to 2 Republican women. Trump's comments like, you can't be a 10 if you're flat-chested, that'll come back to haunt him. There are probably more ugly women in America than attractive women. People take that stuff personally. And you go, Ed, did you hear yourself? People take that stuff personally. Anyway, here to talk about yesterday's results. And, hey, where we go forward, especially with comments like this from Ed Rendell. I've asked Abe Ambrose, legislative director for LiUNA here in Pennsylvania, and a former Rendell staffer, a communications guy, to come talk with us. Abe, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome, Rick. Thanks for having me.
So what do you think? What do you think of Ed's comments that there are more ugly women in America than attractive ones?
Well, listen, the governor has made his share of malaprops over the years. It's certainly something that I would not have advised him to say, nor do I agree with that statement. And in fact, I think it's time we all focus on policies that help people rather than hurt them. And I can tell you this, the comment was inappropriate. I certainly don't condone it. I think it's wrong. And I can also tell you that Ed Rendell's policies when he was in office, those 8 years, were far friendlier to working families and women than Trump will ever be.
Agreed.
If we have that misfortune of him being elected, and I'm going to do everything that I can that he doesn't get elected. But look, here's the thing, Rick. Ed Rendell is Ed Rendell. I mean, not even Ed Rendell can stop Ed Rendell from saying silly things. I don't know how else to put it, brother.
There you go. Does he apologize?
I work for the guy. I love him. I don't agree with him on this, but it is what it is. You file it under I, for it is what it is, brother. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
Does he apologize, or is he doubled down by tweeting out a picture of Ted Cruz's wife?
Well, that's a good question. Now, you're asking me if Ed Rendell would tweet that out or if Trump would?
Well, if Ed Rendell should. I know what Trump would do. He would tweet out a bunch of pictures of somebody's wives.
No, I think it would be refreshing if we actually stayed above the fray and did something novel, like focusing on issues and things like the economy and jobs and making sure that working families are protected and served under the new administration. I think that would be more productive, in my opinion. Again, this is a novel concept, considering that that Trump's presence in this race has really lowered people's standards. I mean, anything goes today. It's just bare knuckles, drag out fights, talking about sizes of hands and appendages and all that nonsense. And boy, do I miss the 80s and 90s where candidates actually acted like they wanted to be president and acted like they wanted to get respect from the electorate, because this stuff is just pure garbage, man. I'll tell you. It's frustrating to watch. And of course, again, what really happens here is that the silliness gets covered more than anything else, and you forget about people's policies. Trump has taken off like wildfire, Rick, and, I'm sorry to say that some of our union brothers and sisters have listened to his message, and that message appeals to them. But then when we tell them things like, this guy is in favor of right-to-work legislation, this guy has taken non-union labor to work on his buildings, has put workers at great risk and peril. When Trump Towers was built, he had to tear down the old Commodore Hotel. And what he did was he contracted with a fellow with a window washing company who went out and got 100 undocumented Polish workers to tear out walls, which had asbestos in them, by the way, and live wires with their bare hands, with no regard for their safety, didn't care if they were trained properly, didn't care where the asbestos was going to be dumped. The contractor on the asbestos was affiliated with organized crime. He didn't care about that because at the end of the day, he just wanted to save a buck. So when our members understand who this guy is, then they begin to wake up and say, oh, well, maybe I ought to pay a little more attention to what's going on in terms of economic policies and things that may hurt me down the road. Because if this man is elected, it is going to be catastrophic for the working man and woman in Pennsylvania and throughout the nation.
I want to get your thoughts on a quote from an NPR story that they put out. This guy named Mike Zubby, he was wearing evidently a Pennsylvania for Trump T-shirt to a baseball game, and he was quoted saying, "What a breath of fresh air to be able to wake up and at least to know that there's someone out there, the average and ordinary type guy. He's not just a billionaire. He's speaking with total unpolitical correctness. He's speaking exactly what we want to be saying to this big monster called Washington." I wanted to get your thoughts.
Sure. Here's a problem, Rick. I don't know this fella. I don't know, what his level of education is. I don't know what his experience is. I don't know what he does for a living. So I don't want to demonize the guy, but that was basically an ignorant statement because you're putting all your eggs in one basket because the guy has been the star of a reality show on television, and unfortunately, he has become a bigger star in a bigger reality show, which is called the presidential election of 2016. So what happens is when people speak plainly and you grab onto something that they're saying, you tend to think that they're really on top of things, that what they're saying is gospel, what they're saying is truth, when it's nothing more than ignorant blather out there, not based upon facts, not based upon anything constructive or productive or really wanting to help people. It's really venting. It's really being angry at something that you don't really understand. And somewhere along the line, and I think this started with George W. Bush, Rick, it was cool to be ignorant. It was fun to be ignorant. It was okay to be ignorant. It's okay to not know what you're talking about and to speak candidly and truthfully. And, this is why we have stupid things like misogyny and racism in our society, because we like to use these ignorant comments and we use them as crutches when we really don't think through what we're talking about. And Trump has abused the system. He has made his fortune by stepping on the backs of others, hurting the little guy, and now the little guy wants to be like him because he puts it all out there in plain-spoken language and little kernels of truth. And, I can relate to this guy because, he's not politically correct. Well, the bottom line is the man is just a plain old ignoramus. I mean, there's just no way to get around it. I'm not going to apologize for anything that Donald Trump does because there's no way to defend it. I think that he is a carnival barker. I think he's a cartoon character. I think he's very dangerous to our society. And the reason why he's so dangerous, Rick, is because you have so many people following the piper. It's amazing how folks don't, they attack the establishment. They attack Washington. They attack Harrisburg. They attack anything that is, position of authority. But they won't look at the person making these kinds of statements because, there's very little to like about Donald Trump. I mean, he's not even a good actor, in my opinion. This is a guy that contradicts himself in interviews. I mean, his own interview, he will contradict himself within 2 minutes.
In the same breath.
It's astonishing to me, and it's very frustrating because, our folks are being led down that path, being sold a bill of goods, and he's not for them. He's for himself, but
Exactly.
He's using working people as a stepping stone to get to where he is and using them and basically, making fun of them. That's how I feel because I'm sure that he sits back, closes the door and says, oh, I got away with that one. It didn't hurt me to say this. It didn't hurt me to say that. I got away with it again. And you know what? The electorate, the working guy and gal that's falling for this, they become the punchlines, and that's wrong.
Yeah, they're the useful idiots in this. But here's the thing that gets me. And look, there's a lot of suffering out there. There's a lot of pain still. And I see this as, people are angry. People are upset. Their lives aren't getting better. They're working harder and longer and more, and things just aren't going the way we were told, that if you work hard, play by the rules, you get ahead. And here's this guy who's now saying we're gonna go get them, whoever them is.
Yeah,
and he's throwing the red meat out there for people, and they're buying it.
Yeah, they're buying it, Rick. And here's the problem: this is a guy. You say, and you're absolutely right. The American dream is not what it used to be, because people are not playing by the rules. People like Donald Trump. They're abusing the system. This is a guy that doesn't even want to release his tax returns because he doesn't want you to know how he has shafted the federal government. The same taxes you and I pay, he has shafted us on, okay? I mean, this is a guy that's worth 60, 70,000 times more than the average person, yet he doesn't want to pay his fair share of taxes to pay for things like transportation and schools and public safety. This is a guy that wants to be the top dog, so then he can continue and his enterprises can continue bilking the system at our cost while he sits there and he laughs at us. This guy didn't make his fortune the right way. He did it. He did it in a sleazy way. He continues to do things in a very sleazy fashion. At one point, this man had 23 businesses. Only 3 of them were turning a profit. He's declared bankruptcy on many occasions. He completely abuses the system, and then he turns around and says to people, folks, you have not been afforded the right opportunities to do things the right way, when he has abused everything that this country stands for. And now he turns it around and he wants everybody to think that he's a choir boy, that he's an angel, that he's the savior, yet he provides absolutely no specifics on any plans, any proposals, for him to stand up there and say, I know about job creation and I'll do the same that I did for this country as I did for my businesses. But, he won't tell us what that is. That's the problem.
And that's scary.
Of course, if you just take a look at some of the stuff he's done, I mean, it would just make your head spin, turn your hair white, because this guy is bad news. He's bad news for this country, and he's certainly bad news for the people of Pennsylvania, man.
So then the question becomes, there was a Republican operative quoted in this NPR story, and he said that he doesn't think there's enough old, angry white people in Pennsylvania for him to win. Do you think there are enough old, angry white people, enough of the Tea Party types to put Donald over the top?
You know what scares me, Rick? To answer your question directly, the answer is yes. Secondly, all you have to do is point to the Quinnipiac poll that came out last week that showed Hillary at 43 and Donald at 42. That is too close for comfort, not something that I'm comfortable with. There are a lot of angry white male voices out there because they have been sold a bill of goods by this guy. And what he does is he uses their fears, he uses their unwillingness to really look at things closely, against them. And it's a darn shame, because this guy knows exactly what he's doing. I mean, this guy is an actor. He is an actor, which explains why he can contradict himself virtually in the same sentence and sound reasonable while he's doing it. The guy is an actor. He's a better actor than Ronald Reagan. I don't think he'd be as good a president as Ronald Reagan, although I wasn't crazy about Ronald Reagan myself. But that's another story for another time. But, I mean, this guy's not even that good, okay? So it is mind-boggling to me how people are latching onto this guy, thinking that he is the savior when he's nothing but bad news. And, he's going to have his problems with women. He's going to have his problems with minorities. He's going to have his problems with young people as well, because, try as I might to think that the Sanders folks are going to come around to Hillary. They're probably not going to come around to Hillary as much as Hillary folks want, but I really don't think that many of them are going to bleed on over into the Trump camp. I don't think it's going to be as significant as some people are saying it might be.
I hope you're right. I absolutely hope you're right. And since you brought that up, I mean, yesterday you had the big primary in Kentucky, and we're talking razor thin.
Yes.
I think Hillary won by something like 1,800 votes.
Yes.
And, you look at this, and it's going to go to the convention, and while everyone was talking, the Republicans going to have a chaotic convention, it's beginning to look like the Democrats are going to.
That's absolutely right. I mean, who would have thought that we would be having this discussion today, Rick, that thinking that the Democrats didn't have this all sewn up as opposed to the Republicans. I really thought it was going to be the other way around, but lo and behold, here we are, and it looks like there's going to be a fight on the floor in Philadelphia, just like Trump is going to have some opposition in Cleveland. Regardless of whether he gets to the number or not, there's still going to be opposition. Now, I know that Mitt Romney has said he's going to abandon recruiting a third-party candidate, but that's not to say that somebody else mainstream could jump out of the woodwork, depending on what happens in the next several weeks. So this election, Rick, has not gone the way anyone has anticipated. It is a wild card. I mean, you cannot predict this. No pundit has been able to say that we are here today, and I predicted this, back in January. Nobody can say that. Nobody.
Well, I think a lot of us feared it, but nobody was willing to come. You're right. Nobody was willing to come out and stake their everything on top of it. And to be honest, deadly consequences in the event that this goes really the wrong way. And that's the scary thing to me. We could easily become a right-to-work nation. We could easily become a no-rights-at-work nation.
That's exactly right, Rick. That's what we have to tell all of our members, is that Donald Trump is not as good, not even 1/5 as good as you think he is. He'll tell you what you want to hear because it's easy, because he hasn't done anything. He hasn't led any government body, has no governmental experience whatsoever except screwing the politicians that help him. He has contributed to many campaigns, not just Republicans, but Democrats and Republicans. He's a silver-tongued charlatan is what he is.
Yeah.
And
so
we need to call him out on that, because if this guy becomes our president, Rick, like you said, it's the beginning of the end for organized labor.
So let me ask you the other side of this last question I've got for you then, because, the reality is all of the fear that we throw in, and I think people realize he's all of those things that we've been talking about. If Hillary were really a good candidate, we wouldn't even be talking about him, because this should be a landslide year.
Right. This should be a landslide year, no question about it. Now, we still have several months before November. So I think that we still have time to right this ship in terms of party unity and bringing people together. And I think there is still enough time to really work on some serious opposition research on Donald Trump. And I do believe that there are more reasonable people in this country than unreasonable people. And what I mean by that is, you still have Republican women who are either going to sit this election out or vote for Hillary out of sheer anger over Trump's ignorance and his misogynistic, unapologetic comments. And, of course, Trump has no market in terms of the minority community. African Americans don't like him. Latinos certainly don't like him, including this one. So he's going to have his hands full in the fall. So, I think this will start to settle just a little bit after Hillary is crowned as the presumptive nominee.
Well, we will see where it goes, and as always, we'll have you back to give us your thoughts. Abe, great talking with you. I appreciate your thoughts and your time. Thanks.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate it.
Our good friend Abe Amoros, Legislative Director for LIONA here in Pennsylvania. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Say the USA is drowning in crafted lies. Save the USA and resume the ties it binds. Stop taking all our money and shipping it offshore. Do the job and join the good folk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour special report recorded on Wednesday, May 18th, 2016. I'm Mark Boulanger. A major complaint that labor leaders have about the sort of trade agreements currently being negotiated, such as the huge Trans-Pacific Partnership, which involves 40% of the world's GDP, is the lack of enforcement of the provisions for respecting workers' rights, such as collective bargaining. This problem is being highlighted again because labor organizations in the U.S. and Colombia have filed a legal case against the Colombian government. The case involves the U.S.-Colombia Trade Promotion Agreement, the TPA, which came into force in May 2012. As part of that agreement, the United States and Colombia agreed upon a program called an Action Plan Related to Labor Rights, which was supposed to include specific steps to be taken by the Colombian government in relation to labor rights and violence in the country. Colombia is one of the most dangerous countries in the world to be a unionist. Since the agreement was signed, more than 100 unionists have been assassinated. I talked to Jeffrey Vogt about the legal case brought forward by the AFL-CIO, the largest labor federation in the United States, and Colombian unions. Mr. Vogt is the director of the legal department of the International Trade Union Confederation. The ITUC is the organization which represents national labor essentials at the world level. I asked Mr. Vogt why the legal case was being pursued.
When the U.S. and Colombia ratified the trade agreement between the U.S. and Colombia, they had established a labor action plan which was meant to address many of the key concerns that U.S. and Colombian trade unionists had raised in the years up to the ratification of this agreement. And what we see is that on many of the areas, the plan has just simply not been enforced. The Colombian government has, in some cases, passed some laws and some regulations that were required under the plan, but then did absolutely nothing to then go and enforce and make sure that these new laws and regulations had any effect in practice. These also constitute a violation of the labor chapter of the agreement. And seeing that there is no progress since this labor action plan was negotiated, they decided to file a complaint.
Part of the problem in Colombia, I understand, is the behavior of multinational companies operating in the country. Do you have any examples of companies violating the principles of the U.S.-Colombia agreement?
The agreement focuses on two. One is a major oil company, Pacific Rubiales, and there is a second sugar processing company that is also indicated in the complaint. But those are two of a number of companies that could have been spotlighted in the complaint. But the complaint is actually focused on the acts of the government and the fact that the government hasn't enforced the law. And when these companies violated Colombian labor law or violated international law, that the Colombian government did little to nothing to enforce those laws. So this is really a complaint against the government of Colombia for failing to do its job.
Would a ruling about the U.S.-Colombia agreement have implications for other trade deals, such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, it's the U.S.-Colombia agreement. The labor provisions are very similar to the ones that have been negotiated into the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And as you may know, the U.S. has taken Guatemala now to arbitration under the Central America Free Trade Agreement, which has kind of older labor provisions. But that case is actually, we should have an arbitration decision in June of this year. So, there are a number of labor complaints that have been filed in the United States, Guatemala, Honduras, Bahrain, Peru, now Colombia. So, it is really evidence that once these agreements are ratified, the countries simply are not respecting the obligations as they've negotiated. And so we had to go through these lengthy processes to try to get them enforced, and up to now have not had much success.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Follow us on Twitter @RadioLabor. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Demanding the super rich to pay their fair share for once. The Rick Smith Show.
I got a bad case.
Speaker of the House, chiming in on the Obama administration expanding overtime pay for some 4 million American workers. Understand, these are working people. This is the thing that's interesting to me is, they were framing it, a couple years ago as, the parasites and the producers. These are the producers, man. These are the management people. Evidently, Paul Ryan has called the overtime rule an absolute disaster. He says this regulation hurts the very people it alleges to help. He writes, who is hurt most? Students, nonprofit employees, and people starting a new career. He says by mandating overtime pay at a much higher salary threshold, many small businesses and nonprofits will be unable to afford skilled workers and be forced to eliminate salaried positions, complete with benefits altogether. Now, I guess you could look at it that way. You could look at that they're going to end up doing away, but you're not going to hire anybody. It's done. No more. Or you could say that they're going to work 40 hours a week, which we in this country have believed for a very long time is a full-time job. This idea that we're going to work 60, 70 hours. I remember an old-timer I met when I was a kid, and he was from Hungary. And he would always ask the question, are we here? Do we work to live or do we live to work? You have the Ryans of the world. You have these Republican operatives, these corporatists who are saying you live to work. That's the purpose that you're on this planet, is to work 50, 60, 100 hours a week. And, of course, we'll pay you $23,660. I find it interesting that Ryan says it's going to hurt students, nonprofit employees, and people starting a new career. I don't know many students who are salaried exempt or should be salaried exempt. As a student, that means your full-time gig is being a student. You don't have time to work 100 hours a week. So I'm not sure how that hurts. Nonprofit employees, look, if you can't do your gig in 40 hours, hire somebody else. Now, according to what I've seen, the rule that they've now laid out would take earnings up to $47,476 a year, or about $913 a week. And then you can work 100 hours a week if you want. We can do that. So here's what could happen. What you're going to do is you're going to consolidate two management positions into one. And you'll have one person who's working like 70 hours every week until they burn out, and then the next person will take over. That's probably what's going to happen out of this. Now, the 47,000 number is a concession, down from the 50,440 that was initially put out and proposed. That was a concession to the business groups. Here, we'll lower it a little bit for you. Evidently, they had taken the southern number, because what they looked for is they were looking for, I guess, the 40th quintile, and this is all into the weeds kind of stuff. But they were looking for the salary level at the 40th percentile of earnings for full-time workers with the lowest wage in the census region. So they were looking at the South. That's the 40th percentile is right there in the South, $913. That's what they went to. So the South pulled it down again. Not surprising. Paul Ryan goes on to say President Obama is rushing through regulations like the overtime rule that will cause people to lose their livelihoods. We are committed to fighting this rule and many others that would be an absolute disaster for our economy. Now, as you know, business groups and the Paul Ryans and the Republicans are going to propose legislation, and I guess they've already gone through and they're looking to push it through. It's Protecting Workplace Advancement and Opportunity Act. Because, hey, the best thing that you can get on the job is a fancy title. That's the best thing. The best thing you can ever have is the little gold-plated name tag with the name manager on it. As I think about this, it reminds me of my ex-wife. And I almost never talk about her, but this is one of those stories where you just almost too good to be true. She was a brilliant student in school, did very well, went on to be a chemist and a big top-line job, did very well for herself. And I was just a guy throwing boxes on a shipping dock, but oddly enough, I was making more money than she was. And that used to drive her coworkers nuts, just absolutely nuts. And at the end of our marriage, part of what would come up, and there were a bunch of reasons, but this was just part of this. There would be in the newspaper, like management jobs that she would circle. And there was one that she said, you should go apply for that. You could get that. And I said, but I make more money than that. Why would I? Economics. Think about economics. I make much more money than that would pay. Why would I want to do that? And the hit came. But you'd be management. And immediately, and I remember this, it was like a shot to the stomach. Because it was the same thing that my grandfather said. That, if you become a truck driver, you'll be a failure. You got to wear a tie and a shirt, and you've got to sit in an office. That's what we told my generation anyway, is what you were successful. So that has really filtered down through all the generations since mine, that in order to be successful, you have to have a title. And I know people with some great titles. They're the executive director of this, blah, 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 of online digital this and that, and all just great titles. And you go, wow, how did you think that up? Well, I got that instead of a raise. And you find out that most of these people are basically starving, but they got great titles. And when they're at the cocktail party or at the bar, I am the blah, blah. And I guess I'm not even smart enough to make up a really good title. I'm the executive, because we all want to be in charge, even if it means we're not making enough money to eat. And this is the kind of stuff that drives me insane. Now, understand, the overtime rules as they were back in the 70s, in order for you to be, in management and that upper crust, and exempt from the hourly laws, you had to be making a good sum. And if I remember the number in today's dollars, like $70,000. I mean, way up there. In order to be exempt from overtime laws, you had to be making good money. And thanks to, the stagflation of the 70s, thanks to 8 years of Ronald Reagan, 4 years of George H.W. Bush, Clinton, I guess, tried. And let's not forget Bush, who tried. I mean, he boosted it up to where it is now, 23,660, which was nowhere near what it needed to be, and did nothing to make sure that it would grow in the future. So here we are, a decade, 12 years later, and it's now finally being raised. Not where it was, but at least being raised up to a level that you go, okay, that's a management level. $23,660 a year. I'm sorry. That is not salaried exempt. And it's wrong. It's that simple to me. Now, according to some of the things that I've seen, of course, the business group's not happy. And the Hill quoted this person, Jade West, who is a senior vice president of government relations. I wonder if they make $23,660 a year. To be senior vice president of government relations for the National Association of Wholesaler / Distributors, warehouse people. Jade says the real victims of this new rule will be those well-compensated workers who will now be required to punch a time clock and lose the workplace flexibility they have enjoyed, and which is so important to women and men struggling to balance their responsibilities at work with the requirement of family life. Yeah, those are exactly the people that this is going to hurt. Those warehouse people who, can leave, come and go whenever they please, because they're balancing life and work. The guy loading the truck, it's just going to hurt him to no end. Are you kidding me? And the fact that a media outlet would quote this person who is the mouthpiece for the National Association of Warehouse People, you go, really? Are you kidding? That's what you came up with? They're going to have to punch a clock now. Yeah. Because we don't want people working more than 40 hours a week. That makes sense to me. Now, there are a couple of things that I think are important. Look, I think the working class of this country needs a raise across the board. We need to raise the minimum. Thanks to the years of Reagan, no minimum wage increase. Combine that with the years of Obama, no minimum wage increase. It's time. The country needs a raise. There needs to be more money into the pockets of families so that they can go out and spend and put food on the table and clothes on the kids' backs and maybe a bike in the driveway. Who knows? But what's happening is because of our tax code, because of the wages being suppressed, we've got a wealth class that's hoarding money all over the world. And we're doing nothing about it. To me, the idea is you restore these overtime protections, people get paid for what they do. They get paid for the work that they perform. And that makes sense to me. And the other part of it is I think it's going to create jobs. You go to these fast food joints where you've got the manager who's working 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week. You're going to have to hire somebody else. You're going to have to put more people in there. I know it's going to hurt. Oh, it's going to hurt the bottom line. We're not going to be able to have such a big wealth class. Well, you know what? When you put more money into workers' pockets, when families have more money in their pockets, what you end up with is more money in the economy. And that, to me, is a good thing. But outside the economic argument, and I find it interesting that the party of family values, they're the ones pushing against this. To me, if you say, look, you're only working 40 hours in a week, and if you have to work more than 40 hours a week, somebody's going to get punished by paying time and a half. Like France, they won't let you. You just can't do it. Although they're moving in the direction of trying to let people do it. For me, that family values argument is kind of an important one. Because while you're working 60, 70, 80 hours, who knows how many ever hours you're working in a week? You know who's not home with your family? Who's not home with your kids? You. And it's mind-blowing to me. And this is I'm interested to see how this is going to play out. How do voters respond to them saying, we want you working harder and longer for less? How do they respond to the message that comes out of Paul Ryan saying, this is going to be a disaster. We're going to have to pay people. How do Republican voters respond to that? Because at the end of the day, that work-life family balance thing that's going on, that has gotten much harder over the years, especially with two-parent incomes where now mom and dad have to work. There's no, we've chosen to work. We have to. The hope is that this begins to turn that tide. Now, for me, I say everybody should join unions. You fight and you bargain and you come up with a wage structure that benefits both the company and the workers, and our structure, all of that stuff. And at the end of it always comes back down to wages, hours, and conditions for me. And as a history buff, as someone who was a student of labor's history, I go back 140 years. You go back to the middle 1800s when the workforce was fighting for the 10-hour day, or for the 12-hour day, then eventually the 10-hour day, and then ultimately the 8-hour day. People fought, bled, and died for that. 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will. People fought, bled, and died for that. And yet here we have a Republican Party saying, no, we want you working all the time. I'm telling you, when will the working class of this country wake up and realize they're not your friends? Anyway, if you missed any of the first hour of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. When we come back, Tax Talk. Stick around. Right back after this.
radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Building trade unions are strongly objecting to an anti-Trump super PAC being formed by the AFL-CIO and three large unions. According to the New York Times, the American Federation of Teachers, National Education Association, and AFSCME are contributing to the super PAC. The building trade unions don't want labor working with environmentalists and billionaire Tom Steyer to form the For Our Future PAC. The letter to the AFL-CIO, signed by presidents of 7 building trades union organizations, declares that we are not climate science deniers and have merely sought to ensure that the employment prospects of our members are not negatively impacted in any economic and energy transition. They object to an AFL-CIO alliance with Steyer and environmentalists creating the anti-Trump super PAC because the building trades say they are economically harming building trades members. The building trades unions are threatening to boycott the efforts of the super PAC to get out the anti-Trump vote in battleground states. LIUNA President Terry O'Sullivan wrote, "We object to the political agenda of the AFL-CIO being sold to a job-killing hedge fund manager with a bag of cash." North America's building trades and the American Federation of Teachers declined to comment on the letters, and we've gotten no response yet on reaction from the AFL-CIO, AFSCME, or NEA. An NLRB unfair labor practices complaint against the WeWork company was filed Tuesday by OPEIU Local 153 attorney Seth Goldstein. Goldstein says WeWork is violating labor law by requiring workers to sign arbitration agreements that strip them of their rights to take labor complaints to the courts. WeWork employee Tara Zoomer challenged the arbitration agreement in a lawsuit alleging unpaid overtime, wrongful termination, and retaliation. Goldstein says WeWork must be held accountable for breaking labor law.
Apparently, Adam Newman, founder of WeWork, pretends that his company is a hip-carrying millennial employer, but in reality, it's the same old thing. He's curtailing the rights of his employees to speak out under Section 7 of the National Labor Relations Act. And he's also trying to take their due process rights away by forcing them into arbitration agreements.
According to federal court testimony from a former Wisconsin State Senate staffer, Republicans were giddy about their voter ID law suppressing the vote in Democratic strongholds and in college towns in Wisconsin. Todd Albaugh testified that State Senator Mary Lozick argued in support of the voter ID law by urging fellow Republicans to consider its impact in Democratic strongholds of Milwaukee and at Wisconsin college campuses. Wisconsin Congressman Glenn Grothman, a former state senator, said he supported voter ID because it would help Republicans win elections. The testimony came in a federal lawsuit challenging aspects of the voter ID law in Wisconsin. WIN is made possible in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
The man who sends the investor class diving for their tax shelters. Rick Smith.
Either that or run for your tax shelter, your offshore tax haven like Panama. And one of the things that I've been talking about for a while is you look at the Panama Papers and the information that's come out of it. And again, nothing should be surprising to anyone. I mean, we've known this stuff's going on. This was just documentation. Now, I got a bunch of responses from people saying, oh, this is the CIA trying to destabilize Latin America and a whole bunch of theories. And to be honest, I really don't care about that. What it does tell me, though, is this is what the wealth class of this globe has done. This is what huge multinational corporations have done to get away with not paying taxes here at home while waving the flag and sending our soldiers off into war. I got to be honest, not surprised by it, but it should be angering, which is why I've asked Frank Clemente, he's the executive director of Americans for Tax Fairness, to come talk with us about a little bit about the Panama Papers and what we should be doing to stop this kind of insanity. Frank, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick. Glad to be here.
So are you surprised by what we've found in this trove of documents that have been leaked, known as the Panama Papers?
I think the surprising thing to me is how vast the archive is, how many how much correspondence and how much paperwork. We knew that there's an estimate that there's anywhere from $7 trillion to $20 trillion in income in tax havens that is basically going untaxed. And I think it's important for your folks to know that Panama is just one place, right? There's lots of other tax havens. They're in Europe, like Luxembourg. Ireland's a tax haven. And our folks don't even know it, but Delaware is the biggest tax haven in the world.
Oh, I talk about the Delaware loophole all the time here in Pennsylvania because, here in Pennsylvania, we've got, if you run a company here, all you need is a magic box in Delaware and incorporate there, and all of your profits get flushed through it, and you don't have to pay taxes here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, yep. No, it's pretty remarkable. And actually, there's legislation in Congress to open it up, to basically require if you're going to be a company registering that the whoever's behind it, whoever's what's called the beneficial owner, that their name has to be disclosed, information about them has to be disclosed to the authorities so that we can determine whether they're running a fraud operation, a tax dodging operation, whether they're engaging in criminal activities and they're stashing their profits there and they're going untaxed, and also just whether it's a rich person who's trying to hide their money there and to avoid taxation.
Or if it's the Donald, since he won't put out his tax returns. That's why I want to see them. I want to know where he's hiding stuff. But, the thing that gets me is we see these things and I go, okay, we now know this. It's nothing surprising. We've been talking about Delaware for years here on the program. Nevada, the same thing.
Yeah.
How do we stop it? I mean, you're talking $20 trillion upwards of $20 trillion not being taxed. That's a lot of kids getting an education. That's a lot of people getting health care. That's a lot of veterans who are homeless finding homes. There's a lot of money we could be doing good stuff with.
Yeah, of course, all that money's not the U.S. money, but I think there's really kind of two levels of work. One is what I kind of call the legitimate use of tax havens, and I put that in quotes. And what I mean by that is U.S. corporations right now have about $2.5 trillion in profits that are offshore. Most of that money is in tax havens. We don't know much about it. Some companies do actually disclose how much they have offshore, like Apple says it has $200 billion in profits offshore. They've disclosed that they're only paying a 5% tax rate on that money. And that means they owe about $60 billion to the U.S. Treasury on their profits that are offshore. So we have an immediate thing we can be doing, which is working in Congress to get them to pass legislation that requires this loophole that be closed. There's a loophole that lets companies build up all these profits offshore, and they don't have to pay any tax on it until they decide to repatriate, bring the money back here. That's not the way the system should work. That's just giving them money tax-free to use as they want. We got to close that loophole, and we're working hard on that. Our slogan is they should pay what they owe on the money that they've got offshore. So I'd say to your listeners, talk to your elected officials, your candidates about the $2.5 trillion that's sitting offshore, and tell them that the companies ought to pay the full tax that they owe on that money offshore. That's a very important place to start.
No, absolutely. And to me, I remember because we keep hearing the call for let's let them repatriate it back to the U.S. and we'll give them a much lower rate because we can put that money to work and create jobs and blah, blah, blah. And it was the same exact message I heard back in, I think, 2006.
2004.
2004. I mean, we've seen this movie, right?
Yeah, that was a real bummer, that one. That was called a repatriation tax holiday. They brought back about $300 billion. They only had to pay about a 5% tax rate on it, which is, as opposed to a 35% tax rate. They paid a 5% tax rate. And they promised that they would create all these jobs. They actually, there was a study that looked at the 20 companies that brought the most money back. They laid off tens of thousands of people in the aftermath of that. They didn't do any investing with the money. They used it for CEO pay and stock. Most of it goes to buying back stock, which jacks up the price of their stock, which then lines the pockets of the executives. So we can't have that. We basically, they're all here in D.C. They're pleading with members of Congress that we have to both lower their tax rates, corporate tax rates, and we have to give them a huge tax cut on the profits they've already made that's sitting offshore in order to get them to bring it back. That's just crazy.
What do you say to my argument that this is learned behavior? I mean, this is Pavlovian learned behavior. We let them do this, then they con us into bringing it back, and then nothing good happens, and then they do it again. Basically, we've set them up to do this by allowing the rules of the game to be so badly rigged that you actually can't blame them for doing it.
Well, this goes to the sort of fundamental corruption of the system, right? Money talks. These are well-heeled corporations. They have jobs out in states and districts, congressional districts. They've got very well-paid lobbyists. They have an army. The number one issue that corporations lobby on in Washington is tax issues. So they've got, thousands of lobbyists work in the halls on tax issues and those are people doing fundraisers for these people. So that's our fundamental problem. They've got a stranglehold. The only way we're going to change that dynamic, there's going to be a big push for quote unquote corporate tax reform in the next year. And unless the public stands up and says, no, you guys start paying your fair share instead of, pushing the tax bill off on us or on small businesses on Main Street, we're not going to change the dynamic. So basically the public's got to get up in arms about this stuff.
Well, let me ask you this, because, recently I was back home in my hometown of Cleveland having lunch with a bunch of family members, mostly union members, who were making the argument that we should allow those companies to bring the money back and put it to work and all of this. And I got to be honest, I'm sitting around the table watching this go on, going, how is it that this message has filtered down to the, basically the manual labor working class, that this is the right thing to do, without really understanding that they're the ones getting screwed by this?
Well, I think we all agree that they ought to bring the money back to do good things with it. I think the difference is should they be able to bring it back at fire sale tax rates, or should they bring it back at the tax rate that they owe? That's really what the debate is. And our position is they should pay what they owe, and conservatives in particular want to let them bring it back at a fraction of what they owe. And that's where the debate's going to be. We're talking, if they bring the money back at the tax rate that they owe, it's $700 billion. That is a lot of money to make major investments in rebuilding our roads and bridges, medical research, clean energy, free college for people who want to go to community college. We're talking, you can pay for all of this stuff with $700 billion, so it's a big chunk of change. And versus if you bring it back at the lower tax rate, it's maybe $200 billion. Now, a lot of people will take $200 billion in a second, not knowing that $700 billion is at stake. And it's not just the money. It's the principle. It's right. The value here. Should these companies be able to get a tax cut that goes from 35% down to 10% or less? If they can get it, then we all should get it. And Absolutely. If we all got it, the government, we wouldn't have anything to make to keep the trains running and the services working.
Yeah, let me get that $700,000 house for $200,000. I'd buy into that. Sure,
that's a good analogy, right?
It's what we've been sold. So let me ask you, kind of the last line of questioning, because I want to get to how we do this. Is it possible for us just to send a bill going, pay this? No legislative. This is what you owe. You pay what you owe. This is it.
Well, we're actually there's two answers to that. One is we are trying to get a member of Congress right now to put legislation in that would mandate that they have to pay the taxes on the money that's offshore, whether they decide to bring it back or not, because that's the way the system works. They're supposed to pay taxes on it. The other is, what do you do going forward? Because right now the $700 billion is what they owe on the $2.5 trillion that's offshore, but that's all past profits that have been earned, right? But we also have to figure out, what are we doing going forward into the future? and how are these corporations going to be taxed in the future on their offshore profits. And that's where there's this major battle. The corporations want to have what's called a territorial tax system. What that is it says that you ought to pay the tax rate that is owed in the country where you're booking the profits. When I say booking the profits, it's where you're recording the profits. Now, that may not be where you're actually making the profits. It's just where you're recording the profits. And remember my Apple story, right? Apple has $200 billion offshore. We know that most of that money is in tax havens. How do we know that? Because they're only paying a 5% tax rate on that. So in the future, if you had a territorial tax system and Apple is able to book their profits in these tax havens like they're doing now, it means they would only pay a 5% tax to the country where they're booking those profits. They wouldn't be paying anything back to us under a territorial tax system. That, in our opinion, is a recipe for companies to even do more, shifting their profits offshore, losing where we will lose a lot more of the revenue if they do that, and it will create a lot more incentive to ship jobs and production offshore to these low tax havens.
Especially in an era where we know most of the profits are made here, and it's accounting gimmickry that's created them offshore.
Yes, it's what's called intellectual property, and they're able to transfer the value of that property to, they own it, they still own it here, they just kind of license it to the tax haven country, and then the tax haven country in turn licenses it back for Apple to use, or for the drug company licenses it back for Pfizer to use here. And what happens is the profits get booked in that tax haven rather than being generated here, even though the discoveries have occurred here.
Yeah, my favorite story is the Jeffrey Giraffe story with Toys R Us, and they licensed the giraffe, and everyone had to pay for the trademarked image. That was one of my favorite stories. But good stuff. At least there's something being done. Maybe we were able to push back on this. But Frank, I appreciate you taking your time, giving some of your expertise. I'm looking forward to having you back again. To maybe we can put this to bed.
Sure. I just encourage people to go to our website, which is AmericansForTaxFairness.org.
And we've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Frank's name. Take you right there. Frank, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Take care, Rick. Bye.
Great talking with you. Frank Clemente, Executive Director there at the Americans for Tax Fairness. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Ain't gonna take it, it's our time. We want the world and we want it now. We're gonna take it anyhow. We want the airwaves.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1979. That was the day an Oklahoma City jury found in favor of the estate of Karen Silkwood. Karen worked as a lab tech at the Cimarron nuclear plant operated by the Kerr-McGee Corporation. Karen joined the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers International Union during a 1972 strike at the plant. She walked the picket line, returning to work once the strike was ended. Karen remained very concerned about safety standards in the plant. So much so that she decided to serve on the union's bargaining team. She also agreed to secretly collect documentation of the plant's negligence. In November, she did a routine self-check and found she had higher than normal levels of plutonium, an incredibly deadly substance in her body. Further investigation found her home was contaminated as well. She became convinced that her employer was attempting to poison her. Kerr-McGee accused Karen of poisoning herself to put nuclear companies in a bad light. Despite her fears, Karen pressed on with her investigation. She was on her way to meet with a union representative and a reporter from the New York Times when she died in a mysterious car accident. She was allegedly carrying a manila folder of documents related to her investigation. The documents were never found. Evidence showed that she was likely forced off the road by another vehicle. The jury found the company at fault for the plutonium contamination, awarding more than $10.5 million in damages. The company fought the verdict and eventually settled with the family for $1.38 million. In 1983, Meryl Streep starred in a movie, Silkwood, telling the story of this incredible woman who gave her life fighting for worker safety. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at laborhistoryin2.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Pam Vogel. Following the New York Times article about presumptive Republican nominee Donald Trump's treatment with women, some media figures downplayed the story. The piece, which conducted more than 50 interviews of women that had worked with Trump or knew him socially, revealed, quote, unwelcome advances, a shrewd reliance on ambition, and unsettling workplace conduct. Listen to Fox & Friends weekend co-host Tucker Carlson.
Is Trump creepier on women? Yeah. Sometimes he says kind of weird things I wouldn't say. But we also learned that Trump promotes women more aggressively than, like, Hillary Clinton.
And Washington Times columnist Kelly Riddell.
Bombshell, a man who used to own pageants, wanted his contestants to be pretty and skinny. Like, I mean, is this really news?
And Morning Joe co-host Mike Barnicle.
It's boorish behavior. You wouldn't want it occurring to your daughter by a guy, but it's Donald Trump. And when it comes to Donald Trump, it comes with the dinner. People expect it.
Dismissing Trump's treatment of women exemplifies how the media holds Trump to a lower standard than other politicians. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
What the hell we fighting for? Just surrender and it won't hurt at all. Just got time to say your prayer while you're waiting for the hammer to fall.
So here's one of those reasons I want to see the Donald's tax returns. You know, in looking at these tax loopholes and all of this chicanery going on, that's why I want to see it. And if you remember, not too long ago, he was the Donald was on with George Stephanopoulos with ABC News, and he was asked about it. And what's in it? What do you pay? And Trump said, quote, right, flat out, I fight very hard to pay as little tax as possible. This is not the Arnold Schwarzenegger saying, I pay more than I should just because I want to look good and I want to make sure that I pay my fair share. This is the guy saying, look, I'm going to take advantage of every possible loophole. There's just no way I'm going to pay any more than I absolutely positively have to. And even then, I'm gonna not do it. So Stephanopoulos asked him, what's your tax rate? And Trump responded, as you know, it's none of your business. You'll see when I release. But I fight very hard to pay as little tax as possible. And you go, well, it's old news, right, Rick? And I go, it is. It's old news. A couple of days, a week old, maybe. We now find out, thanks to Crane's Business of New York, that the Donald qualified for the STAR program in New York, which is given to property owners to kind of help with their property tax. It's about $300 a year. Kind of a question though, because you've got Forbes magazine saying that the Donald's worth like $4.5 billion. You got Bloomberg News who's saying he's worth like $2.9 billion. I've heard people say he's worth $10 billion. He says he's just very, very rich. He's just really rich. Here's my problem. If he is, if he's the 4.5 or the 10 or the 2.9 or whatever, if he's this, this super rich mogul, how does he qualify for a $300 a year tax benefit that is for people who make couples that make less than $500,000 a year? How is it possible that he's made this? Now, the city is saying that Trump shouldn't have gotten the tax break. And they're not going to explain how or what happened, but they're saying he shouldn't have gotten it. But here's the thing that bothers me. And look, he's not the only rich guy getting away with this stuff. He's just the one who's stepping out in front and wanting to be president, and we get to examine. It's the exact same thing that happened with Romney last time around. The reason I wanted to see Romney's taxes, where is he hiding money? And then how do we stop that? How do we get them to pay their fair share? Look, I don't get to take half of my salary and hide it in a magic box in Delaware so that it's not taxable, nor should they. But here's my huge problem with it. Huge problem. That $300 or $302 he got from the STAR program, that was $302 that didn't get into the school system. That was $302 that didn't put a book on a desk, that didn't help pay a teacher, that didn't help keep the lights on or the heat on in the schools. This is $300 that went into a rich guy's pocket that, to him, $300 is like a penny in your pocket. Now think about this. We gave him, the state of New York gave him a $302 tax break on his penthouse apartment in the Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue. Think about that for a second. Let that kind of just sink in, if you will. Now, what's going on is, the question that I then have is he only making $500,000 a year, which is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. But are they only bringing in $500,000? And if that's the case, is he as rich as he says he is? And I go, why is that important? Well, there's something about being honest that I think is kind of important. Look, I understand propping yourself up. I get it. But this is one of those things where you go, wow. Now, what's interesting to me also, he gets a $302 tax break on an apartment that has a market value, according to the city, of only $5.2 million in a development where a unit below his went on the market for $23 million last month. So there's part of me that goes, wow, he got a real bargain with the tax rate that he got without the benefit of the $302, just because they undervalued the price of the house or the apartment. And then it gets me thinking, according to the Manhattan Institute, 75,000 people in New York earned more than $500,000 per year. How many of them are getting this? And the other side of this is, how many of them are gaming the system too? I mean, it's kind of, this is important stuff, I think. Because the question then becomes, is he not as rich as he says he is, or is he a tax cheat? Or is he both? Because for me, I look at what's going on in this country, where we have, a handful of people with unimaginable wealth. And it's not a matter of jealousy. It's a matter of going, as a matter of public policy, how is it somebody can take that kind of wealth away from workers, away from the community, and hoard it for themselves? And at a time where we have homeless veterans, at a time where we have children going to bed hungry and seniors who are living in poverty. And I know it's all of that downtrodden stuff, Rick. We're talking about millionaires and billionaires. Well, actually, gazillionaires. People who, like I said, have unimaginable wealth, but yet will cheat every chance they get because they can. And that's the frustrating thing about this. So this is another one of those moments where you go, does he have to pay the $302 back, or should he go to jail? We're going to follow up on this and see how he got the tax break, if we can find out, and what the recourse is. Because look, if you or I cheat on our taxes, don't they come and get us? Don't they come and make you pay interest and fines and penalties and all of that stuff? So another one of those moments where you go, I want to see the tax returns. Have to see the tax returns. Let's take a quick break. Right back. When we come back, we're talking Mark Steer, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. New report out today on, well, looking back at the Corbett years and the massive cuts to higher education and what that's meant for working families. Quick break. Right back.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour special report recorded on Wednesday, May 18th, 2016. I'm Mark Boulanger. A major complaint that labor leaders have about the sort of trade agreements currently being negotiated, such as the huge Trans-Pacific Partnership, which involves 40% of the world's GDP, is the lack of enforcement of the provisions for respecting workers' rights, such as collective bargaining. This problem is being highlighted again because labor organizations in the U.S. and Colombia have filed a legal case against the Colombian government. The case involves the U.S.-Colombia Trade Promotion Agreement, the TPA, which came into force in May 2012. As part of that agreement, the United States and Colombia agreed upon a program called an Action Plan Related to Labor Rights, which was supposed to include specific steps to be taken by the Colombian government in relation to labor rights and violence in the country. Colombia is one of the most dangerous countries in the world to be a unionist. Since the agreement was signed, more than 100 unionists have been assassinated. I talked to Jeffrey Vogt about the legal case brought forward by the AFL-CIO, the largest labor federation in the United States, and Colombian unions. Mr. Vogt is the director of the legal department of the International Trade Union Confederation. The ITUC is the organization which represents national labor essentials at the world level. I asked Mr. Vogt why the legal case was being pursued.
When the U.S. and Colombia ratified the trade agreement between the U.S. and Colombia, they had established a labor action plan which was meant to address many of the key concerns that U.S. and Colombian trade unionists had raised in the years up to the ratification of this agreement. And what we see is that on many of the areas, the plan has just simply not been enforced. The Colombian government has, in some cases, passed some laws and some regulations that were required under the plan, but then did absolutely nothing to then go and enforce and make sure that these new laws and regulations had any effect in practice. These also constitute a violation of the labor chapter of the agreement. And seeing that there is no progress since this labor action plan was negotiated, they decided to file the complaint.
Part of the problem in Colombia, I understand, is the behavior of multinational companies operating in the country. Do you have any examples of companies violating the principles of the U.S.-Colombia agreement?
The agreement focuses on two. One is a major oil company, Pacific Rubiales, and there is a second sugar processing company that is also indicated in the complaint. But those are two of a number of companies that could have been spotlighted in the complaint. But the complaint is actually focused on the acts of the government and the fact that the government hasn't enforced the law. And when these companies violated Colombian labor law or violated international law, that the Colombian government did little to nothing to enforce those laws. So this is really a complaint against the government of Colombia for failing to do its job.
Would a ruling about the U.S.-Colombia agreement have implications for other trade deals, such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, it's the U.S.-Colombia agreement. The labor provisions are very similar to the ones that have been negotiated into the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And as you may know, the U.S. has taken Guatemala now to arbitration under the Central America Free Trade Agreement, which has kind of older labor provisions. But that case is actually, we should have an arbitration decision in June of this year. So, there are a number of labor complaints that have been filed in the United States, Guatemala, Honduras, Bahrain, Peru, now Colombia. So, I mean, it is really evidence that once these agreements are ratified, the countries simply are not respecting the obligations as they've negotiated. And so we had to go through these lengthy processes to try to get them enforced, and up to now have not had much success.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Follow us on Twitter @Radio Labor. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Anybody who thinks that we have not been meeting our obligation with respect to students and education in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is mistaken. We continue to meet our obligation because we have enabled, or we directly tax, $27 billion in educational funding in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Mike Turzai there. Anyone who thinks we don't fund education, well, they don't know anything. Which is why I point to an interesting article that I came across today from GoErie.com. Evidently, Erie, Pennsylvania, the largest school district in the region, might be getting out of the high school education business. They're considering closing all 4 of their high schools. Why? They don't have the money. And you go, but I thought we were funding our education. Not happening. And what we've done to higher ed, if you remember the Corbett years, his first budget, they wanted to cut something like half of all the money to higher ed. It's not any better, which is why we've asked Mark Steer, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center, to come talk with us. Mark, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure, Rick, as always.
So you got Mike Turzai good there going, hey, we fund education. We do it a lot, Mark.
You know, here's a good rule for Pennsylvania politics. Whatever Mike Turzai says, the opposite is true.
But I look at this report out of Erie where they're talking about closing down the 4 high schools. To me, that's insane.
It's totally insane. You know, people need to understand, if you don't care about your own kids, you need to care about your community, because every time we add a year to the amount of education in a metropolitan area, we get 17.4% higher gross domestic product per capita. That is, a year of education on average added means you're 15 to 18% higher in terms of your economic activity. Wages go up at an average of 18% just for 1 year. So are they going to go down from wherever they are now by cutting out high schools and leaving so many kids without the opportunity to go on to college? It's just madness.
It is madness, and I got to read the story more on this, because where do these kids go if there are no high schools in that district? It's nuts. And then what happens when to kids when they want to go on to college? And I remember the Corbett years; they were very painful. But I remember that first budget; he wanted to cut 50% to higher ed. Now I think they cut it back to only 20%. So instead of taking the whole 5 fingers, they only took 1 finger this time. What has that done for students here in the Commonwealth? What has it done for their ability to get that higher education?
Well, here's what we found. Our national partner, the Center for Budget and Public Priorities, just put out a report. Actually, it's going to be putting out a report tomorrow with data about education cuts in states across the country. And you know what? As usual, we're down at the bottom. We are in the bottom 5 of the states with the greatest cuts. And just between 2008 and 2016, we have had a cut of 33.3%. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it's 33.3% cut in the funding for our 4-year colleges in Pennsylvania. That's an average per student of $2,234. Well, that's horrendous. And the consequences are, pretty obvious. You cut the amount of money the state gives these colleges. The money has to come from somewhere else. The percentage of funding for these schools that comes from students has gone up from 62% to 72%. Tuition has gone up over $2,200, or 19.7% since 2008.
Wow.
It's just terrible.
It is terrible. But again, you then ask the question, how many kids did this now shut out of this and not give them the opportunity to get that extra year, 2, 3, 4, as you pointed out, just 1 year, you're talking 15 to 18% more earning potential. What does it mean for them who they can't take it on?
Yeah, I mean, some kids obviously don't go because they can't afford the college. But that's not even the whole problem. Some kids don't aim high enough. They might be able to get in at a better school, but because of the funding cuts, because it's so expensive, they don't aim at a school they might be able to get into, leaving spots for other kids at other schools. And it's, let's be clear, this is a problem that affects everyone in Pennsylvania, but it's particularly bad for two groups of people, for people of color, who often go to high schools that don't have the kinds of guidance counselors and resources that enable them to figure out how they can afford college. And the other people it really hurts is rural people. We have 26 rural counties in Pennsylvania with little or no access to community college. And many of their high schools also don't have the resources that enable kids to understand how they can get the funding to go to college outside their own community. So we're really hurting our kids in Pennsylvania, which means we're really hurting our economy.
Yeah, we're really hurting the Commonwealth because it harms our competitiveness.
Absolutely.
And if you want to attract jobs, we keep hearing about location being, one of the top 3 of 5 that people look for to relocate jobs. Education and infrastructure are the other 2. And I look at what's going on with our education and our infrastructure, and I gotta wonder why anybody would want to come here.
Yeah, because you know what, we do really badly compared to other states in terms of the percentage of people who have a more than a high school education. Only 56.1% of Pennsylvania adults in 2013 had more than a high school degree. That ranked us number 41 of 50 states. That is at the bottom.
I've been saying
we're a little better with the percentage of adults with a college degree at 20.7%, but that's still number 29. Is that really what we want for a kid? We want to raise them in a state that's number 29 out of 50.
Yeah, hey, we're going to shoot for the middle of the pack. But, I've been saying for some time, and maybe you'll agree, at some point we've got to be talking about, instead of just K through 12, we got to be talking K through maybe 14, to where you get that associate's degree as that next, like my generation thought, the high school diploma was almost good enough. Maybe we need to be pushing that forward. And I know there are going to be people out saying, oh, we can't do that. But those are the same voices that said we can't have K through 12.
That's right. And, we were one of the leaders in K through 12. Thaddeus Stevens, before he changed our Constitution to outlaw slavery, was a Pennsylvania political leader. We were the first state outside of New England that had education for elementary and secondary education provided by the public. We were leaders in some ways with higher education. Benjamin Franklin studying the University of Pennsylvania. But, we have fallen back pretty far since those days.
Yeah, and it's the austerity cuts, in my view, mainly the austerity cuts that came during the Corbett years that I think has caused a big portion of this, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you go back to, say, 1984, at that time, 62% of the funding for our universities came from the state. Only about 28% came from student tuition. That totally reversed by 2007. So it's been getting worse for a while. But the last 8 years, it's gone from 62% to 72%. It's gone a lot worse, and that's the Corbett cut.
Yeah.
The funny thing about this is when I started reading this report, I have to say I'm looking at all this data, And, you start reading the numbers, your eyes glaze over a little bit because this is just common sense. And it's really a sad example of how ideology has overcome common sense in Pennsylvania. Who among us doesn't want their kids to get as much and as good education as they possibly can? Have you ever heard anyone who say, I don't want my kids to get a college education. It's going to ruin them for life.
No, I've never heard a parent say that. I have read of stories of the past where the big industrial robber barons, the big industrialists were saying that education spoils people for work, but that's about the only place I've heard that.
Yeah, but you know what? Even that's not true anymore. You ask business people, as you said, where do you want to locate? They want to locate where there's an educated population. And, we've got to be moving our people up into jobs that require more education. I'll give you one example, and this comes back to another issue you and I have talked about, the minimum wage issue. I heard yesterday Kevin Shivers, the guy from the NFIB, says, you know what, if you raise the minimum wage, we're going to have more of those machines, those automatic scanners, and less checkers at supermarkets. And you know what my answer to that is? Good. That's what we want, because we want more people writing the programs for those machines. We want more people designing those machines. We want more people fixing those machines and less people entering numbers in a cash register. And to do that, we got to raise the minimum wage, and then we got to educate people for the jobs that are created when we automate and increase productivity, because those jobs are better paid.
Right, but what do you say to the person who says, not everyone's fit out for college, not everyone's going to be a rocket scientist or a computer programmer, that you need to have an economy that meets the needs of all working people?
Well, that's true. Not everyone is going to get a PhD. Not everyone's going to get a master's. But there are all sorts of jobs that need some education beyond the high school, and the vast majority of kids in America, and certainly in Pennsylvania, are capable of getting that kind of education. And we need to make those opportunities available to them. And the more we do it, the more we have jobs to take advantage of those skills. And those jobs are better paid, and when people who are paid more spend more, everyone benefits from all of this. So, we need to be on the high road, not the low road.
I'm with
for
you.
Our economic future.
I'm not a Luddite. I'm not so much a Luddite, but I do prefer someone else scanning my stuff. I didn't sign up for that job myself, but that's just me.
Well, it's easier for younger people who have more experience with that. Those do confuse me once in a while, too.
So let me ask you a last kind of line of questioning here. How do we turn this around? Because as you've pointed out, this is a long slog to get here. How do we turn this around, especially at a time where we hear politicians saying, we're broke, we can't afford it, there's no money for these. Those things are a luxury that we can no longer afford. How do we turn that around?
Well, you know what? We can afford it. Last week, you and I were talking about how we can raise taxes and have the top 1% pay most of it, and find the money to educate our kids. The money's there. We need to be asking the people who have done really well in this economy over the last 30 years to pay a little bit more so we can bring everyone else up to their level.
And the other part of this is, what are the costs of not doing this? And I think you pointed that out earlier. Every year of college, every year of additional education, you're looking at upwards of 18% more in economic activity. So I would argue we almost can't not do it, right?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. We may have to raise taxes, I think, on the very rich mostly and upper income people in the short run. In the long run, everyone's going to get richer if we educate our population and get more people with higher paid, higher productivity jobs. And you know what? The other thing to keep in mind is when we leave kids out, kids in rural areas, kids in inner cities, there may be a genius among them, someone who's going to invent a cure for cancer or a cure for heart disease or a new technology. There are all sorts of talents in those kids, and by not giving them an equal shot in life, not only do we hurt them, but we don't take advantage of those talents.
That's a good point.
I come from a group that when my great grandparents came to America, people said, those folks aren't too bright, and they're going to do manual labor their whole lives. And once once my folks and my people got educated, we started winning Nobel Prize. That's true for every group in America, and we got to make sure everyone has that opportunity to get an education.
If you want to
there
check,
are a lot of Nobel Prize winners who won't win them unless we give them a real start in life.
Excellent point. The report, Years of Cuts Threaten to Put College Out of Reach for More Students. You can take a look at it tomorrow at pennbpc.org, or just go to thericksmithshow.com. Click on Mark Steer's name. It'll take you right there. Mark, great stuff. I look forward to talking to you again next week.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Again, take a look at the report at pennbpc.org, or just go to thericksmithshow.com. Click on Mark's name. Take you right there. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Time to talk.
10% of the people own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
When asked what the world needs, people tend to go all gushy and offer up such fuzzy stuff as world peace and more kindness. Yeah, but get real. Let's talk practicality here. What the world needs is something tangible, a new whiz-bang product that will delight all of us and make the world a brighter place. And I know just what it is. Ready? The world needs trees, shrubs, flowers, and other plants that glow in the dark. I don't mean glow dimly like a lightning bug or a luminous painting of Elvis on velvet, but a potted plant giving off enough light to read by. Wouldn't that be cool? Okay, actually, it'd be silly. But ready or not, luminescent plants are likely to be the next grand contribution to humankind by the genetic tinkerers who brought us such advances as tomatoes implanted with fish genes. This latest bunch of biotech Frankensteiners have given their mad science an oxymoronic title, synthetic biology. Their goal is to create new living things not found in nature by inserting man-made genes into the DNA of, say, a rose bush. Voila, a burning bush that'll light up your yard at night. Already, one of the plant tampers has formed a corporation called BioGlow to commercialize such things. Wouldn't you like your beautiful flowers to glow in the dark? He asked with a maniacal fervor. No, sir. First, they're beautiful as is. Second, there you narcissistic bioengineers go again, screwing with nature. This crew is recklessly spreading untested synthetic organisms around the world with no idea of how they'll mutate in nature or what malicious predatory organisms might result. That's not science. That's screwballism. This is Jim Hightower saying, for more information on why a little less hubris is warranted, contact Friends of the Earth at FOE.org.
Hightower's commentary is brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown. From Wall Street to Washington, this monthly newsletter reveals who's doing what to whom and why. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. The new president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, won't be inaugurated until June, but he's already making some loaded statements. The Philippines abolished the death penalty in 2006, but Duterte says he wants to bring it back, and no ordinary death will suffice.
What I would do is to urge Congress to restore the death penalty by hanging.
Asked who would qualify for a death by hanging, he seemed to put together a list on the fly. Murderers, robbers, rapists, people with unlicensed guns, drug users. For particularly heinous criminals, he recommended a double hanging. Quote, after the first hanging, there will be another ceremony for the second time until the head is completely severed from the body. And inside your smartphone, there's likely a little FM radio receiver through which you could listen easily to terrestrial radio signals. The only thing is, your cell phone carrier probably turned off that receiver. To listen to a live radio station, you'll need to download an app and burn through your monthly data. But it doesn't have to be that way. Radio broadcasters in Canada are dialing up their campaign to force carriers to unlock the FM receiver. They've got an app that lets you tune right in on supported devices, but when this broadcaster downloaded it on his Samsung Galaxy S5, up popped an error message. AT&T doesn't grant access to the app to use the FM receiver. Make no mistake, the radio industry wants listeners to help their bottom line, but they're making a broader case. Here's FEMA Administrator Craig Fugate.
Again, we're still recommending you get a radio. And if your radio is now in your cell phone, that's just one less device that you have to have an extra. But it's important to make sure you can get those broadcast in an emergency.
For more global news headlines, visit talkmedianews.com.
Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Yesterday's election results, something positive came out of, at least in my view, out of Oregon. The Oregonian is reporting that the anti-Nestle ballot measure actually passed. So the bid to block Cascade Lock's water plant has succeeded. The Hood River County voters, they said, no, we don't want Nestle Waters to come and build a plant. We don't want them taking our water. We don't want them shipping it all over the world. We would prefer to keep our water. Thank you very much. In fact, 68% of the folks voting said no, said we don't want that. The company had hoped to build a $50 million bottling plant at the town's port, where 100 million gallons of water a year would be taken out of the Oxbow Springs, put into bottles under the Arrowhead brand, and shipped, who knows. Additional Cascade Lock's municipal water would be sold under the company's Pure Life brand. And this is one of those conversations I had at lunch. A friend of mine, attorney friend of mine, was saying, the climate change and all this, kind of mocking the whole thing. I'm going, look, if you want to know what's going on, if you want to know that climate change is real, look at what Nestle and look at what these water companies are doing. Look what the privateers are doing. They're buying up all of our water supplies. They're privatizing it and positioning themselves to where, hey, if you want to drink a water, well, I got a liter of it here for, I don't know, $6, $10, $20. You think gasoline was going to be expensive? You think $4 a gallon for gas is expensive? Wait till we start having a water shortage. Because unlike gas, you need water to live. And Nestle's CEO has already said no one has a right to water. So I see this, and, maybe there's an awakening going on, or maybe this is just some sleepy little county in the middle of Oregon who's, hippie liberals and saying, no, we want to keep our water and we don't want any capitalists here. Or maybe it's people who are going, wait a minute, this is a precious natural resource that maybe we should be keeping, for the people. Just kind of a thought. As a lot of people are saying, the reality is we could be fighting wars over water very soon. And I look at this as, maybe a, kind of an awakening of people going, hey, we should be not privatizing our water. Just my thought. Anyway, to me, good stuff. Anyway, if you've missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And it's great to have it right there. Give it to a friend to make sure that they have it as well. It's one of those things that it's free because we believe that you help out the working class folks by not charging them and get the message out. So, hey, it makes for a great gift because it is absolutely free. And if you want to email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Love to hear your thoughts on the water situation and what's going on with our election. When we come back, we're going to talk about what's going on in the world of labor with Doug Cunningham from Workers Independent News. Lots of labor stories going on, especially this thing going on at the National AFL. Could this be the Trump's doing? Could this be something that's got him involved? Well, we will find out. And I'm hoping I'm wrong, but this could be trouble. Anyway, gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Building trade unions are strongly objecting to an anti-Trump super PAC being formed by the AFL-CIO and 3 large unions. According to the New York Times, the American Federation of Teachers, National Education Association, and AFSCME are contributing to the super PAC. The building trade unions don't want labor working with environmentalists and billionaire Tom Steyer to form the 4-Hour Future PAC. The letter to the AFL-CIO, signed by presidents of 7 building trades union organizations, declares that we are not climate science deniers and have merely sought to ensure that the employment prospects of our members are not negatively impacted in any economic and energy transition. They object to an AFL-CIO alliance with Steyer and environmentalists creating the anti-Trump super PAC because the building trades say they are economically harming building trades members. The building trades unions are threatening to boycott the efforts of the super PAC to get out the anti-Trump vote in battleground states. LIUNA President Terry O'Sullivan wrote, "We object to the political agenda of the AFL-CIO being sold to a job-killing hedge fund manager with a bag of cash." North America's building trades and the American Federation of Teachers declined to comment on the letters, and we've gotten no response yet on reaction from the AFL-CIO, AFSCME, or NEA. An NLRB unfair labor practices complaint against the WeWork company was filed Tuesday by OPEIU Local 153 attorney Seth Goldstein. Goldstein says WeWork is violating labor law by requiring workers to sign arbitration agreements that strip them of their rights to take labor complaints to the courts. WeWork employee Tara Zoomer challenged the arbitration agreement in a lawsuit alleging unpaid overtime, wrongful termination, and retaliation. Goldstein says WeWork must be held accountable for breaking labor law.
Apparently, Adam Newman, founder of WeWork, pretends that his company is a hip-carrying millennial employer, but in reality, it's the same old thing. He's curtailing the rights of his employees to speak out under Section 7 of the National Labor Relations Act. And he's also trying to take their due process rights away by forcing them into arbitration agreements.
According to federal court testimony from a former Wisconsin State Senate staffer, Republicans were giddy about their voter ID law suppressing the vote in Democratic strongholds and in college towns in Wisconsin. Todd Albaugh testified that State Senator Mary Lozick argued in support of the voter ID law by urging fellow Republicans to consider its impact in Democratic strongholds of Milwaukee and at Wisconsin college campuses. Wisconsin Congressman Glenn Grothman, a former state senator, said he supported voter ID because it would help Republicans win elections. The testimony came in a federal lawsuit challenging aspects of the voter ID law in Wisconsin. WIN is made possible in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Now the lessons of the past we all learn with workers' blood. The mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities to the farmlands in trenches full of mud. 'Cause war has always been the boss's way, sir. Come on! The union forever defending our rights. Let's fight the right wing of workers unite. With our brothers and our sisters from many far-off lands. There is power in our union.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Some good news out of Wisconsin today as the Wisconsin Supreme Court that has issued a ruling dealing Scott Walker another blow. And it's good to see that finally the state of Wisconsin is finding its mind and pushing back on some of the insanity. Scott Walker, real quick, wanted to take complete dictatorial control over the education system there in Wisconsin. And the state Supreme Court said, no, we're going to keep the Secretary of Education, going to keep that separate, give them some independence, and not be your lapdog and your puppet. 4-3 decision. So the conservative Supreme Court there dealing him a blow. It should be interesting to see how Walker responds to this. Anyway, here to talk about what's going on around the world in the world of labor news, Doug Cunningham, Workers Independent News. Doug, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it's always great to be with you, man.
Good news coming out of Wisconsin, at least a little bit of sanity anyway, right?
Yeah, and that's a Supreme Court that's really stacked, with conservative justices here in the state, and they ruled this time that they're going to keep the education secretary independent from Walker's control. And the current superintendent, the education superintendent here, Tony Evers, had opposed overturning the law in the first place, saying the case before the court was about preserving his office's role as a nonpartisan constitutional officer in charge of implementing and overseeing education policy. We've seen Scott Walker systematically try and dismantle all worker rights in Wisconsin. We've seen Scott Walker dismantle the civil service system in Wisconsin that was a progressive reform in our history here in the state, and return it to a more politically partisan kind of system, and a patronage kind of system.
Yep.
And we've seen at every turn, not only does he cut vital programs and take away workers' rights to collectively bargain, but he's trying to cement dictatorial control by the governor on a whole range of issues here in the state. And, unfortunately, they don't get that at one point or another there may be a different party in control of Wisconsin's government, and then maybe they can make use of some of those laws. But it's really sad here to see all that stuff, all those progressive reforms rolled back by his administration, Scott Walker and his minions, who are still firmly in control of our state government here.
But you got to understand, these are the business-friendly people who only think tip of the nose. They don't. I truly believe they're incapable of thinking beyond the next quarter.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that they are. They don't have the most wisdom in the world, and they don't have the most vision in the world. That is for sure. And I think Wisconsin now is virtually last in business creation and new jobs started here. And it's really strange because, Scott Walker started off by claiming, Wisconsin's open for business. Well, his administration has been really bad for business, actually. And another thing, we're in the political season, obviously, so I got to mention another little bit of Wisconsin news from here. There's a federal case right now going on in court in Madison talking about voter ID. It's a challenge to various aspects of the voter ID law, which is in place here, passed by Walker and his Republican backers. Well, there was testimony the other day about how Wisconsin state senators, Republican state senators, were absolutely giddy over voter suppression, using voter ID for voter suppression. And this testimony came from a former Republican Senate staffer here in Wisconsin. Todd Albaugh was the guy's name. And he's testifying in federal court that when the senators in Wisconsin were considering this bill, they were urged to consider the impact on Democratic strongholds in Milwaukee and on college campuses around the state. And Glenn Grothman, who's a Wisconsin congressman now, used to be a senator, he was one of the ones in those private meetings talking about how it would help Republicans win elections if we could get this voter ID passed because it would suppress Democratic voters.
Of course it was. But, I live in Pennsylvania where we've got the Speaker of the House who literally came out and said, voter ID, done. We can now get Governor Romney elected as president. He literally came out and said those words.
I don't know why there's not a legal challenge that can be had to these people to charge them with conspiracy to disenfranchise voters with these laws, having those kind of discussions behind the scenes and go at them criminally. They know, they're consciously knowing that they're going to be disenfranchising a certain segment of voters, Democratic voters and minorities in particular. And so, that seems like a crime to me.
No, it is a crime to me, and it's something that I'm hoping that the voters push back on and start sending those folks packing. Let's get to the news, the labor news. Anything else to report on with the Verizon strike? We've had people on for the last couple of weeks. It's kind of a blackout right now since the Secretary of Labor is involved. What are you hearing?
That's right, and unfortunately, I don't have much more information than that, other than to say, that this involvement by the Labor Secretary is an effort to get this thing resolved after more than a month of these 39,000 approximately workers being on strike in the streets. And they shouldn't have even been in the streets in the first place. Verizon making such huge profits each month and posting them up. They don't need to add to demand concessions. They don't need to push things to this point. But they did. And you're right, there's a blackout right now, a media blackout. Nobody's talking to me either for publication or broadcast especially. And so this is a situation where they're going to be meeting in Washington for a while. Both unions, the CWA and IBEW, agreeing to do some federal mediation here, to try that at least, and see what happens. And let's hope that there's a resolution that's a fair and just one that the unions can accept.
Yeah, at the end of the day, from what I'm being told, the main issue, and I don't know what you're being told, the main issue is the outsourcing. They were down in the Philippines where they were chased by armed security and surrounded by SWAT. This is where our jobs are going to end up, Doug.
Absolutely right, and Verizon's being very nakedly demanding about that. They want the right to keep doing it, you know. And about 13,000 of these workers who are on strike work in the U.S. call centers, so they are directly imperiled by this outsourcing. And that was just atrocious treatment for these CWA representatives who went to visit the call center facility there and were driven away, not only chased off the property by armed security thugs, I call them, but also chased down in their vehicles through the streets and stopped again. And at one point, one of the masked officers in SWAT type gear with an automatic rifle used the rifle to pound on the door of the car, you know, wanting them to open it up. The union people stood their ground and said, no, we know our rights, and eventually they were let free without any injuries. But that's atrocious kind of behavior and treatment, and Verizon could have stopped it and could have nipped that in the bud if they'd wanted to and protected it. It could have been a tragedy there.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, it could have been worse. Verizon could have been wanting to ship those jobs to Colombia, where they'd have just taken those union members and thrown them out of a plane.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's remember, as somber and sober as that is, that in lots of places in this world, you're still risking your life when you stand up for workers' rights.
And this is what I try to explain to people. We have the ability still now. I do see a time down the road where maybe we become a culture where armed thugs are chasing union members down on the roads. But right now, we still have an opportunity to organize and to be able to sit down and collectively bargain for better wages, hours, conditions. Oh, and also job security like these folks are doing.
Absolutely, and we can't take that lightly. Look, you know, there's lots of people in history that never thought certain kinds of authoritarian, totalitarian governments would come into power, and they never thought they would see certain atrocities that ended up playing out in vivid living color before their very eyes to their horror. Yeah. So let's not be smug about anything, take anything for granted. So whenever there's even the slightest violation of your human rights here in this country, well, we still have the right to stand up against it without risking our lives, literally. Then we better do it, because otherwise we won't be in a strong enough position later on to defend it when they really come after us.
Right there with you. Paul Ryan, a guy from your backyard, came out today and said that the changes that the Obama administration wants to make, the regulatory changes to overtime protection, are a disaster. They're going to be horrible. They're going to destroy the economy. They're going to hurt students, and the nonprofits going to just be job killers.
Well, of course, because Social Security was going to turn us into a socialist dictatorship, too. Remember that? I mean, these people are just hilarious if they didn't have any power, you know? I mean, if they were just fools running around spouting this nonsense, I could laugh about them and really have a great time doing it. But that's ridiculous. Any time that you have an advance for working people, you're going to hear from the Paul Ryans of this world, from him and his crowd, from the anti-union crowds, from the billionaire puppets. You're going to hear, oh, it's a disaster. We can't possibly do it. It's going to cause the collapse of our whole economy, our whole country. These are a bunch of chicken littles talking about the sky falling every time a worker gets a dime extra. And this is a great reform. It's much needed. What we're talking about is the U.S. Labor Department's rule, the new rule on overtime, extending overtime protection to about 4.2 million people by raising the salary threshold of salaried workers. What happens is over time, once upon a time back in 1975, 60% of all salaried workers were eligible for overtime. But inflation came along over the years, and regulatory changes made under George W. Bush eroded that. And so today there's only 7% of salaried workers who are eligible for overtime. This law, this rule that's being enacted by the U.S. Labor Department under the Fair Labor Standards Act takes care of that, fixes that, at least for the time being, and makes 4.2 more million people eligible for overtime, so they can't be worked to death and called managers, you know, when they're really poorly paid workers being exploited.
Yeah, but does this mean the end of those really great titles? Because, you know, I know people have some, you know, like executive director of, you know, this, that, or the other thing, and Grand Poobah or whatever. Does it mean the end of those titles? Is this the end of it?
I doubt somehow that it's the end of it, because, you know, the corporations and their billionaire owners will always come up with extraordinarily nimble and weird contortions to try to deprive working people of our rights. And so, you know, who knows if it'll be the end, but it's a good step forward, and it's solid because it's going to affect millions of people, and it's going to be real tangible results. They're going to get money in their pockets they wouldn't have otherwise had. And no, Paul Ryan, it ain't going to be a disaster.
There you go. Have you seen this letter that's supposedly been sent from the Building Trades Union to Rich Trumka of the AFL? Kind of, a lot of people are telling me it's this split. This is going to be the end of labor. What's your take on it?
Well, I tell you, it's not comforting news. I mean, I did see it. I saw the New York Times. They had a leaked document to the New York Times, a couple of letters, some labor official. I've tried to get response from the various unions involved, the building trades and all of the folks that signed the letter to everybody in the AFL-CIO, but they haven't responded. They prefer not to respond at this point. Now, what they're trying to do is put together a super PAC to take on Donald Trump in the battleground states, and the AFL-CIO was forming an alliance with environmental groups and this billionaire funder of progressive causes, Tom Steyer, who's a big environmentalist himself, supports environmental activities for groups. And they were going to come up with about $50 million. Well, the building trade said, wait a minute, this Steyer guy and some of these environmentalists are actually hurting our members because they're taking positions that end up depriving us of jobs, like the Keystone Pipeline, for example. So the building trades unions, while I get where my brothers and sisters in the building trades are coming from, trying to protect the economic interest of their members, you know, this kind of division is not good for their members, for the labor movement in general, or for the progressive movement in general, especially right now as we head into this election year. So I hope that they're able to sit down, actually talk to one another, and come to some kind of resolution of this, and don't end up, you know, splitting labor over this, because one of the things that the building trades said they might do is boycott the get out the vote effort in these states that this super PAC was going to help to make happen. So I hope that some resolution is reached behind the scenes, behind closed doors, between the AFL-CIO and the building trades unions, so that this super PAC can continue and labor's effort won't be diminished.
Now, this doesn't mean that the building trades are going to be backing Donald Trump, does it?
I hope not. Although, you know, some unions have not committed yet, and and within certain labor unions, there's a higher percentage of folks who do support Trump. And, you know, the building trades is one of those, actually. They had a poll that showed about 25% might support Trump. So in general, about 30% of union households in any given presidential election will go and vote Republican. If Trump gets an added 10% on top of that overall, that could be trouble. And so, you know, there is a possibility. Teamsters haven't endorsed anybody yet. I haven't gotten any indication they're going to endorse Trump. But who knows? I mean, if the building trades unions, they were pretty upset over this. Yeah. If they continue to be that upset and can't make peace with the rest of their brothers and sisters about this, we could see something like that happen.
Well, the Teamsters endorsed Ronald Reagan in 1980.
That's right. So you can't rule it out. You know, it depends on how hot the tempers run, how big the issues are perceived to be, and whether or not any real good faith effort is made to mend those fences. And I hope it does, because look, solidarity is what we need in the labor movement, and solidarity is what we need in our politics to the extent possible. And we do not need to be divided, especially against a phenomenon like Donald Trump.
Yeah, and especially the money that's going to be flowing into that, and we know huge amounts of money.
Yeah, we know which side the billionaires are going to be on. We can't have labor on opposite sides of the fence throwing rocks at each other when the billionaires are all going to be lined up behind Trump, and we know that.
It'll be interesting to see where this goes. You did a story on this fired WeWork employee. What's going on with that?
Yeah, I just actually talked with her today. Tara Zoomer is her name. She got fired after refusing to sign a forced arbitration agreement that ripped off her rights to go to court if she had a grievance about labor rights and labor law. And increasingly, companies are using these arbitration agreements as a condition of employment, and they tie the hands of workers. They prevent civil actions. They prevent class actions. In some cases, they try to prevent them from even going to the NLRB and go to an arbitration system that the company sets up instead. Well, she refused to sign it, so she got fired. She not only refused to sign it, she sent an email blast out to her coworkers telling them to get a lawyer before they sign it and to stop and investigate this and check it out. So she's still fighting. There were some court maneuvers and everything else that got her into New York court instead of California, where this happened. But now there's an NLRB case as well that's been filed, and she's continuing to fight this. And I told her today during my interview after we got through with the question and answer, I said, well, welcome to the labor movement, Tara. She emailed me back and said it was great talking to me, and she did. She says, I feel officially welcomed now into the labor movement.
Good. So is this the modern-day yellow dog contract that we're talking about?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, she said that they put what amounted to 50 pages of documents in front of her that included an employee manual, I guess, handbook, and this arbitration agreement, and basically told the workers they have to sign it. You know, and without reading it in some cases, people did. You know, they just signed it.
Yeah, because you want the job.
They feel like they have no power, they have no recourse, and of course, if they don't have a union, they are on their own for a while until they can hook up with a lawyer and get together with other workers and form a case. But I mean, this is an example once more of just billionaires and millionaires and businesses trying to rip away every single human right you have in terms of labor rights and trying to impose their version of reality on you. So they tie you all up in a nice, neat bundle. So you have no rights, no recourse, and they get it all.
And they could just steamroll right over top of you.
Yep, absolutely.
Sad
and
stuff.
who's going to? And if it's the arbitration agreement that the company has chosen, what do you think your chances are in getting a fair shake in that arbitration?
No chance at all. It's the same kind of arbitration agreement you see in with your cell phone or with doctors. There's tons of these out there that most people sign without even thinking about because they don't bother to read them.
It affects consumers, not just workers who are in a labor rights kind of a situation. It affects consumers as well and takes away their rights, all of our rights.
No, I went to a doctor once to get a hip injection, and they wanted me to sign one of these things that I couldn't sue. I'd have to go to arbitration. And the doctor was vehement. He was like, he was angry that I refused to sign it because don't you know it's for your own good?
Of course it always is, isn't it?
Sad stuff. But this is a story we're going to have to keep an eye on. Doug, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the news. Look forward to having you back again.
All right. Always great being with you, man. Good luck with the show, and I'll come back anytime.
Thanks so much, Doug Cunningham. Workers Independent News, laborradio.org, the website. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Firefighters, my friend, and the kids locked in the Capitol are fighting till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said, this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line. And if they come to strip our rights away, we'll give them hell every time. This is a union town, all down the line.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1972. That was the day that Maggie Kuhn stood before a group of reporters to tell them about her organization, the Gray Panthers. The idea for the group had started 2 years earlier. 65-year-old Maggie had received the unwelcome news that she was going to be forced to retire from her executive position with the United Presbyterian Church. Maggie was not ready to retire. Instead, she started to organize. This was during the era of the Vietnam War protests, and Maggie found allies with young people who also wanted to see changes in society. The original group developed to build connections between young and old. They called themselves the Consultation of Older and Younger Adults for Social Change. Later, they shifted their name to the catchier Gray Panthers. The Panthers adopted the motto, Age and Youth in Action. In 1975, the Panthers held their first national convention in Chicago. 200 Panthers attended, representing 37 states. At the convention, the Panthers adopted a platform of issues. They included issues important to seniors, such as an end to mandatory retirement, better housing for the elderly, and expansions to rent control. But the platform also included other social justice issues, including support for the Equal Rights Amendment, a call for full employment, amnesty for Vietnam draft resistors, and even, after much debate, the legalization of marijuana. In the more than 40 years since their founding, the Gray Panthers have continued to advocate for a variety of issues. One key achievement was a court victory to make Medicare regulations more understandable to seniors, and they were years ahead of the nation by supporting single-payer health care for all. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been discussing the popular and often used political term America First and the Stewart family of Quaker Oats fame. In 1940, R. Douglas Stewart, Jr., the grandson of a co-founder of Quaker Oats, found himself studying law at Yale University. The war in Europe and Nazi aggression was the political topic of the day. The war was a year old when classes began at Yale in September. The year before, it had been clear that a majority of Americans preferred neutrality. However, when France was overtaken by Nazi Germany in the spring of 1940, the sentiment began to change. Douglas Stewart was an isolationist, and he sensed the need to organize efforts to maintain the strong opposition to war. And on September 4th, 1940, he established the America First Committee to do just that. And Stewart was certainly not alone. Join us again for Stewart's Allies. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Just a day job that someone's got to do. It's kinda hard when everyone looks up to you. Try to make it look easy, gonna make it look good, like anybody would. I'm just your average, ordinary, everyday.
Those arbitration clause agreements that they put into everything, and they're in everything. Anything that you'll buy, doctors, you name it, they're all there. And the fact that this woman had the audacity, the unmitigated gall to say that she wasn't going to sign one, got her fired. And you know, immediately I start thinking back to days of old with yellow dog contracts. You know, saying that, hey, if you won't sign this contract saying you'll never join a union ever, and if you do join a union, we can fire you. It takes me back to those days. Because to me, this is the beginning of how they get away with really any legal recourse. They get you to sign it. We go to an arbitrator that they choose, and the arbitrator's living is dependent on the decisions that they make for the company who chooses them. Do you really think you're going to get a fair shot? Honestly and truthfully? You know, come on. It doesn't take a genius to figure out why they're doing this. And I remember the doctor that I went to, because I have a bum hip. And, you know, I was going to try one of these hip injections. I had never had one, and I don't ever plan on getting another one. But, you know, I sit down in at the doctor's office, and they hand me this stack of papers. There's a ton of them. And I'm the type of person who reads everything. I don't sign anything, you know, even the HIPAA stuff. I want to make sure that it is what it is. And I guess I'm crazy that way. If I put my name on it, I want to know exactly what it is. And yes, I'm the guy who read the entire mortgage when I signed the mortgage stuff. All of the things, all of the addendums and all of the clauses and all of the fine print and all of that, because I want to know what it is that I'm signing my name to. And I'm in the doctor's office reading this. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing this. And he's like, what do you mean? I go, we might as well cancel this appointment because I'm not doing this. He goes, well, I'm not doing it unless you sign it. I go, like I just said, I'm not doing this, so we're going to have to cancel our appointment. And he's like, well, then we're going to charge your insurance company. I go, go ahead, see if they'll pay it. You didn't tell me that you were going to spring this on me. He goes, but it's for your own protection. I go, no. This is to make it much cheaper for the insurance company to buy me off or to blame me for what goes on. Let's come on, be honest on what is what. But this guy was actually sold on the belief that, you know, it was going to help. If there was an injury, it was going to help, and we just want to make sure that you're taken care of, and we care about you. And I'm going, I don't know. Look, I don't think you're going to screw me up, but. And I'm not the type of person who would sue unless it was something really egregious. But I look at this, and the fact that I would be giving up any future rights that I have in the event that something really egregious were to happen, just wasn't going to happen. Not my thing. Wasn't going to do it under no circumstances. And, you know, I've been saying for years, because we've seen these cases pop up. You may remember the Concepcion AT&T case, where, you know, we found out that, you know, if you can screw a whole bunch of people out of $30 at a time, that's the way to go, because of these arbitration clauses. Or the Rent-A-Center case, where, you know, I think his name was Johnson, made him, instead of going to EEOC or the labor board, made them go to arbitration because you sign these clauses. And I've been saying for a while, we need to outlaw this stuff. We need to outlaw the demand. If you want to freely enter into that contract because you truly believe it's a more efficient way of doing things, I think you should be able to do that. But to say that it's mandatory and you don't have a choice, and we're going to force you to usurp the court system and really, you know, public means for a private system is insane. Just completely nuts to me. And I look at this and it's just, I remember walking out of the doctor's office, looking at all the people who were just signing this stuff without thinking about it. Oh, I trust the doctor. I'm going to sign. I'm going to sign everything. And it reminds me of, your first day of employment where I was the last guy on the job too. When they set you down with all of this is the stuff you sign, I actually read it. And I highly suggest others do the same thing before you put your name on it. But I guess I'm not surprised that this is what we're going through right now. Another reason, in my view, that we need to be organizing and fighting back. Going to take a quick break. When we come back and talk with Bob Ney, Talk Media News Service. Stick around. Right back after this.
Global protests for action on climate change receive no coverage in the corporate media. Obama's EPA issues new rules to cut the methane. Shell Oil gives the Gulf of Mexico another spill. A win for whales. Plus, stop me if this sounds familiar. April 2016 was the hottest April ever recorded.
How could I stop you if you didn't tell me what it was until after you said stop me if it sounds... Anyway, all of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Cole, your asthma means it's working.
Yep. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, the fire ravaging across Canadian oil sands country, ironically enough, continues.
Yes, there are now new evacuations in the still raging Fort McMurray fire. On Monday, 4,000 workers have been ordered to be evacuated from the oil camps. Officials say that the fast-moving fire is still destroying about a mile of forest an hour. If the fire overtakes the work camps, the good news is that the tar sands themselves are not really very flammable while in the ground. But the camps themselves are stocked with gasoline, propane, and toxic industrial chemicals.
Oh, brother.
The massive wildfire has been driven by high winds and record heat in Canada.
Go figure. I wonder how that happened.
Speaking of record heat, it's official. April 2016 was the hottest April ever recorded on the planet since record keeping began. That's according to new global temperature data released by NASA over the weekend. In a month that saw record ice melt in Greenland and the Arctic, April also broke the record for record breaking. It was the third month in a row to break the previous record by the largest margin ever recorded.
This is amazing. Every single month now, month after month after month, is a record hot month.
That's right.
Following year after year, and now third year in a row, probably on track to be the hottest year ever recorded on planet Earth.
Yes, to be specific, the last 12 months in a row have each been the hottest of that month ever registered. And you're right, 2016 right now is all but certain to be the hottest year on record, meaning that the last 3 successive hottest years in a row were all records, and that has never happened before in human history.
Well, that can't be, because Trump told me.
All of this with the global warming and that, a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay? It's a hoax.
It's just a hoax.
Well, not to the Obama administration. They've issued landmark new rules to cut the methane emissions, that is. The EPA issued the first ever regulations to curb emissions of methane leaking from oil and gas industry operations. The goal is to cut methane, a very potent greenhouse gas, by 45% over the next 10 years. But the new rules apply only to new wells. Rules for existing wells are in development. Naturally, the oil and gas industry objects, saying that they're already working on controlling those leaks and that the cost is going to outweigh what they say is only a marginal benefit. Scientists disagree.
So the industry says its voluntary efforts should be enough?
Yes.
Despite the fact that for decades now they have failed to curb the methane leaking off of these sites?
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know why we don't just trust them.
Another world is possible. We are unstoppable.
Protesters all over the world, including in the U.S. Capitol, marched for climate action over the weekend, demanding a global transition to clean energy.
No action, no action.
In Colorado, protesters temporarily blocked an auction of oil drilling leases on public lands. In England, protesters blockaded a coal export facility. In Australia, protesters blockaded one of the world's largest open pit mines. It was all part of Break Free 2016, a 12-day campaign said to be the largest global civil disobedience campaign in the history of the climate movement. Demonstrations occurred all over the world, but at least here in the U.S., very little coverage in the corporate media.
I saw no coverage in the corporate media. Again.
But maybe you heard about this one. Shell Oil says it's making progress on cleaning up an estimated 90,000 gallons of oil that spilled in the Gulf of Mexico on Friday. About 100 miles south of the Louisiana coast, Shell says that the slick will not impact the shoreline or commercial fisheries.
Of course they do.
Finally, a win for whales, at least whales around Hawaii. A federal judge has ordered the U.S. Navy to halt harmful high-intensity sonar used in training exercises in certain areas where whales are known to migrate and breed. Studies have shown that high-intensity sonar can cause damage to marine animals' ears, making them bleed, and is linked to mass strandings and lower breeding rates of certain species.
Thanks to that federal judge. And thank you, Desi Doyen, for much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today. Check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
This is not good news for Chris Christie, who wants to be VP. Quinnipiac poll out today shows the voters of his home state of New Jersey not thrilled with Chris at all. In fact, his job approval rating, the unfavorable 64, the favorable 29. His lowest rating to date and the lowest approval rating in 6 years for any governor in the 9 states that have been surveyed by the Quinnipiac folks. Not good. And not good for being the VP poll. Just kind of my thought. Anyway, let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Bob Ney, Talk Media News Service. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thanks, Rick. I'm not sure that's fair. I think Chris Christie could bridge the gap.
You think?
He could bridge it.
Would we close a couple of lanes to the bridge?
Yeah, you got that one. Okay, I hope. Yeah.
Or are we going to let anyone
be
know?
Attorney General. So.
That's what I've been saying from the beginning.
Yeah, that's where he's going.
Attorney
General. Absolutely.
And that's the smart choice if you are a Republican. That's where he would be, I think, most dangerous.
Yeah. Sure.
But not surprising, the folks of New Jersey do not want him.
No, I mean, look, he was. It's like John Kasich now. It was one thing, and they got excited, and he won Ohio, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, he's campaigning, he's not winning. What's he doing? State time, It was starting to dwindle.
Yep.
And Chris Christie had, what was that comment, Rick? Help my senior moment here when he said about there was no flood or something, or he was out campaigning. So that never helps.
That never helps. But yesterday, the hope was that for some of my Democratic friends, that the day would finally put the crown on Hillary. Some of my Bernie friends were hoping that it would be a blowout and that push Bernie still into it. We got kind of a blowout and then a tie.
I mean, I look at Kentucky as a Sanders win. Now, I know he didn't technically win, but I look at it I've looked at it today, and I've been analyzing this on radio. I just look at it as a win in the sense that that's just too close. I don't care what anybody says, or you compare Barack Obama and the numbers, and Bernie's different. I don't care what anybody says. It's too close.
Yep. I mean, 1,800 votes.
California, hang on to everybody's seats. Plus, throw in this match that's lighting the Civil War here between Bernie and the Democrat National Committee and Harry Reid. I think you and I could probably find some sins on each side of things
Absolutely.
done or not done. But I've got to tell you, if I were Harry Reid, I wouldn't refer to him as silly. I really wouldn't.
Oh, no, not at all. Because that could be the guy who runs the third party candidate. Did you look at what happened in Nevada, though?
Yes.
All of the response I'm getting from people is that Bernie supporters were in the wrong. And I got to be honest, I looked at the video, the whole all the clips I could get a hold of, and immediately I said that the woman who was the chair did the absolute worst, dumbest thing, and it would be a mistake. But I haven't seen a lot of people picking up on that. I don't think the Bernie people were so much wrong. Maybe the throwing of the chairs is a bit extreme, but being upset, I see a reason to be upset.
Well, let's look back at the fact that, this is a case that has built, in police work they call it the MO.
Right.
Debates on the Saturday before Christmas, which doesn't help Bernie Sanders when he was first starting and nobody even said his name. Saturday night debates. People picked to head up committees for the Democrat National Committee for down the road for the convention that were pure, absolutely dyed-in-the-wool Hillary people being picked. The computer thing, with Bernie's people, sharing of money between states, Hillary Clinton and the Democrat National Committee. Then Iowa, where the votes weren't all in, but she banged, the chair banged the gavel and said Hillary wins. Then you go to Nevada, where if you listen to the video of the A's and the nays,
the nays had it.
Where did they come up with? And then they banged the gavel, you 99 or 66 are gone, convenient number. So it's a method of operation. Now, granted, somebody threw a chair, all right, I've seen people in Congress, somebody broke somebody else's finger one time on the floor of the House. So those things happen. But Bernie denounced any form of violence, and then he got attacked for that. So I don't know. I think that it's almost, I don't want to say somebody incites a riot, but I think things have been done to a boiling point.
No, I'm with you. And do you think, what's interesting to me is I'm watching this Van Jones, Debbie Wasserman Schultz thing, and he just said today that he actually wished Reince Priebus was the head of the DNC.
Well, I have a friend of mine today that was so disrespectful. He's a politico. He's an operative. He makes money, off of the Democratic side. He was so disrespectful to Bernie today, and I said, how is it that a lot of us, I serve with Bernie, recognize that Bernie is real and I think needs some respect, in his movement. But the viciousness of a couple of these people who are people in the circles, political circles, why are they coming out so viciously against Bernie? I don't get that part of it, because Hillary Clinton, if she's the nominee, I say if, needs not only Bernie, she needs Bernie's people, and you can't buy Bernie. Here, you want to be Secretary of State? You can't buy Bernie.
No, and I think even if he goes back to the Senate, there's a good chance he's the chairman of the Budget and Appropriations Committee.
Right. Exactly.
So that's power there, regardless.
The Senate's likely to flip.
Yeah, I mean, with Republicans defending 24 seats, there's a chance, especially if Hillary's able to win. Although I think she's a bad candidate, I don't see her carrying Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's also a chance, if done right, if Trump takes a lead and people say, "Ooh, we need a balance here," and Trump could win, but down ticket hurts, the Senate could flip.
Right. So going back to Kentucky, you think that was a victory for Sanders being that close? I mean, it was out of, 430,000 votes? It was a separation by about 1,800?
Right. And I know what people will say to me right now. She won the delegates. I really don't care. Yes, I know it's about a delegate count. If Hillary Clinton at 7 o'clock tonight gets to 200 over the delegates she formally needs, all right, Bernie Sanders is not leaving this race.
Nope.
If she has triple the delegates she needs, Bernie Sanders is not leaving this race. And it's not because he's trying to be mean or some ego deal. He knows if he leaves the race tonight at 9 o'clock, she will fall down trying to go to the right by 9:15.
Right. So if you're the guy running this, I mean, if you're Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who I think has handled this poorly is not even the right word, but has handled this horribly. Do you give him whatever he wants in the platform, knowing that the platform doesn't mean anything anyway, or do you put up the fight?
Well, I think the first thing that you do, if I was at the DNC, the first thing I would do, first of all, is I would stay off of television before I picked up the phone and talked to Bernie Sanders personally. That's the first thing. There would have been a phone call to Bernie Sanders personally. We'd have had a conversation. There would have been a phone call to Hillary Clinton. And there would be conversations with the top brass of the Democratic National Committee and state chairmen that, look, we're going to have a level playing field here, guys. You know, we're all on the same team. We're just having differences of opinion. I mean, you don't go on TV and say, well, that Bernie's butt is unacceptable.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, and this is where you start from a premise that they don't accept, because they don't accept Bernie as a Democrat.
Well, that's true. That's true.
And from the beginning, they were hostile to the fact that he's always caucused with them. He's always been with them, but he wasn't officially the D. So they did everything they could do to block him out.
Well, that's true. And then the platform, yes, you sit with Bernie and you ask what he does want in the platform, and I think you yield to what he wants in the platform. But this isn't even going to get to the platform part, because it's disintegrating right now over the issue of fairness. Look, if somebody loses, like some of the Cruz people, they really hate Trump, but some of them said, okay, I don't like Donald Trump, but we lost.
Right.
And we lost fair and square. We didn't lose because the Republican National Committee, tried to help Trump. In fact, they tried to stop him, If you lose fair and square, I'm not saying you're happy, but you've been around. If you lose fair and square, then, you can be going in a different direction of another candidate.
Yeah.
If you think you've been cheated, it's a different story.
Yeah, I mean, you learned as a kid. You good sportsmanship. You hold out your hand. If you lost fair and square, that's how you do it. But sadly, we've got too many people who think that they're entitled to always win, and that's what I think part of this dynamic is on the Democratic side. Everyone, thought it was her turn, and that anybody standing in the way is just a nuisance, if you will. Nuts.
Well, I told friends early on, and they laughed and laughed at me. I said, Bernie Sanders is going to be around, and they laughed, and he was old, and his hair, and whatnot. And here he is.
No, I said from the beginning as well, he's got a great narrative, and I'm a narrative guy. He's got a good story. He's out there, and he's been right on issue after issue over the years, and that hasn't changed. Let's move on. What else is going on?
I heard today when I gave a speech in Ohio, and from Republicans that were there also, his speech was electric in California.
Yeah.
It was electric.
Yeah. A couple other things to get to. Evidently, the Senate has confirmed the first openly gay military secretary. Is that true?
Now, you know what? I was traveling today. I didn't know that. Who did they confirm?
His name was Eric Fanning. I knew that. In fact, they unanimously approved his appointment as Secretary of the Army. Did you happen to see the people that Trump would put on the Supreme Court?
Yes, I did catch some of that. I don't know them.
All white people.
But I saw that.
Not surprising, though. Bob, always great talking with you, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rick.
Have a great day. Bob Ney, Talk Media News Service. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
When asked what the world needs, people tend to go all gushy and offer up such fuzzy stuff as world peace and more kindness. Yeah, but get real. Let's talk practicality here. What the world needs is something tangible, a new whiz-bang product that will delight all of us and make the world a brighter place. And I know just what it is. Ready? The world needs trees, shrubs, flowers, and other plants that glow in the dark. I don't mean glow dimly like a lightning bug or a luminous painting of Elvis on velvet, but a potted plant giving off enough light to read by. Wouldn't that be cool? Okay, actually, it'd be silly. But ready or not, luminescent plants are likely to be the next grand contribution to humankind by the genetic tinkerers who brought us such advances as tomatoes implanted with fish genes. This latest bunch of biotech Frankensteiners have given their mad science an oxymoronic title, synthetic biology. Their goal is to create new living things not found in nature by inserting man-made genes into the DNA of, say, a rose bush. Voila, a burning bush that'll light up your yard at night. Already, one of the plant tampers has formed a corporation called BioGlow to commercialize such things. Wouldn't you like your beautiful flowers to glow in the dark? He asked with a maniacal fervor. No, sir. First, they're beautiful as is. Second, there you narcissistic bioengineers go again, screwing with nature. This crew is recklessly spreading untested synthetic organisms around the world with no idea of how they'll mutate in nature or what malicious predatory organisms might result. That's not science. That's screwballism. This is Jim Hightower saying, for more information on why a little less hubris is warranted, contact Friends of the Earth at FOE.org.
Hightower's commentary is brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown. From Wall Street to Washington, this monthly newsletter reveals who's doing what to whom and why. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. We turn today to Venezuela, a country experiencing a power shortage driven by drought. The power cuts there have now crippled oil production, Venezuela's top export. There's wild inflation, shops are running low on many commodities, people are agitated. Now, a petition calling for a recall election to remove President Nicolas Maduro has circulated the country. It reportedly received more than 1.8 million signatures, but when it was turned in to authorities, they rejected the petition as fraudulent. Maduro also declared a 60-day state of emergency, which essentially tasks the military with maintaining order.
Politically speaking, I think he's going to have to go more authoritarian, and that's what he's essentially doing.
Professor Eduardo Gamarra teaches politics and international relations at Florida International University.
What they're going to do is they're going to say, you did not comply with the requirements for the referendum. You're going to have a demonstration on Wednesday. The demonstration is illegal. And we're going to call out the armed forces, and the armed forces are going to impose order.
But what can Maduro do about the economic situation? He can't make it rain, so the drought and electricity crisis will probably drag on. To try and spur production, Maduro threatened to jail business owners if their factories lie dormant. The factories say they lack the cash to buy goods.
You get the sense that President Maduro in Caracas pulls on the levers of power, and there's no consequent action at the other end in the bureaucracy, at the local level, at the state level.
Harold Trincunas at the Brookings Institute says Maduro will struggle to restart Venezuela's economy.
Venezuela depends on oil to generate over 95% of its foreign exchange earnings. That's really important for a country that imports over 70% of consumer products. So it's sort of easy to understand where the scarcity is coming from.
For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com.
Bringing sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
knew it had to happen, right? A woman reports that she was in a Danbury, Connecticut Walmart, went to the bathroom and was washing her hands when another woman came up to her and started yelling at her that she didn't belong there, that she had to get out. She was disgusting and sick, and what's wrong with you? And, this woman, this Danbury, Connecticut woman who has short hair, was wearing a baseball cap, jeans and a T-shirt on, had no idea at first what was going on. And then it dawned on her that this crazy woman thinks I'm a man. And she goes, and this is the funny part of this video that I spent a couple minutes watching. She points to her chest and goes, "Look at these. It's not that I'm not well endowed. Look at these." And there was part of me that goes, I think the woman was, who was being accosted was just kind of shocked that it was her, that this can't be real. That, I'm obviously a woman. What's wrong with you? But it didn't seem to matter, as this woman is yelling at her that she's disgusting and don't belong there. And this is the kind of insanity that's going on in this country right now. And I've been waiting for it. You've heard stories of it happening. This is the first one that I actually saw the response. And this is going to happen, where you're going to have women who look, androgynous, women who look like men who, I know a bunch who are fairly masculine. They're going to start being accosted in bathrooms because people are, "You look like a man." Nuts. Just insane. And I guess, maybe we could make a reality TV series out of it. Who knows? Maybe that's what we have to do. And speaking of reality TV series, and I got to be honest, I thought that whole Duger nonsense and the 19 and counting and all of the, the pump out units every 10 months kind of TV reality show was over. Evidently not. Evidently TLC is spinning off the 19 and counting, or 400 and counting, or whatever the heck it is, to Jill and Jessa Counting On. Evidently, they just wrapped their first season, and they teased the audience by saying that they might be pregnancy buddies, which has begun people to go, "Hey, are these crazy people planning their pregnancies based on reality shows, based on ratings and keeping their reality show?" And I go, duh. Yes, that's a big part of it. But the other part is just the idea of constantly pumping out units, having kid after kid after kid, because that's their crazy cult-like thinking. And this is a generation brought up with thinking that kind of cult-like thinking. And we're putting it on TV. That's the frustrating part in all of this. We're actually putting these crazy people on a pedestal and telling children, "Look at this." And on a certain level going, be crazy like them. I got to be honest. Which is why we don't watch TV in my house. We don't let the kids watch television. We just don't do it. We'll watch an occasional movie. We'll do things like that. But, putting on these idiotic reality shows, are you kidding? You want to talk about child abuse? Child abuse is letting your kids watch this nonsense. And I'm surprised, kind of shocked that someone would ask the question, which of you two will have your second child first? Oh, we might have it together. We're going to be pregnancy buddies. Of course they're going to, because one, it's going to be good for ratings, but two, it's the cult-like religion. Oh, help us. Help us. At a time where you've got the Republican Party saying that we can't give workers a raise, we need to keep pumping out more units. Wow. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. You don't want to miss our conversation on what exactly has happened to higher ed here in Pennsylvania, the overtime stuff. Lots of good stuff today. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Be back tomorrow. Thanks for being here. Look forward to seeing you again here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like the tide flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious, in amorous array.